So good afternoon, everybody. If you could all start taking your seats, please. Appreciate it.
Tammy. Working.
Okay, Judge, give us 1 second. We got another minute. It is time to sit. So. Are you two? Chris, are you guys all set over there? Thank you. So. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you all today. We are well into the swing of things on the appropriations side, and today we're talking with this afternoon we're talking with the Judicial Department, and we're going to start off with Judge Elizabeth Bizzuto, and I'm sure there'll be questions from everybody, and they can do their engaging with the afternoon when they do that, Judge. So it's a pleasure to see you here today, both of you. And I think we'll just dive right into it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about your current services increases. And so I saw that we're going to annualize the cost of 13 Superior Court judges. Does this include the judges that will be voted on in the next month or so?
It's only the judges who are scheduled to be before the judiciary on the 24th of February. So it's only those 13.
So everybody else is already incorporated into your budget.
Well, there was an IOU for the last class of judges that got missed, but that IOU has been included in the budget as well.
Okay, so that IOU incorporated what?
It was $4 million, I think, that was owed.
It's about $3.8 million that you see there in a baseline adjustment, and that takes care of the judges that were appointed in
Last
FY 24 last.
I see that you asked for 387 million and change, and the governor supported 382 million. So there's some 5 million there. Is that just position vacancies and other things like that, or what is that?
It's primarily related to Brian Hill, Executive Director, Administrative Services. Thank you. That difference, Senator Austin, is primarily related to the request that we made that was consistent with the recommendation for judges' salary increases that was made by the Judicial Compensation Commission.
So when it says annualize the FY 25 deficiencies of 3.8, that's what they're talking about, the IOU on those judges.
That's correct.
Thank you. And then the additional judicial marshals, I see there's 60 more this year and 60 more next year would that be a total of 120 in the second year?
Right.
That's correct.
Does that cover retirements and other such things, or is that just all new positions?
Those would be new positions, 3 judicial marshal classes in 26 and then 3 classes in 27.
To cover vacancies?
Vacancies. We still struggle in that position. I think last time we were before you, we had 687, and now we have 688 after a year with 3 classes that graduate the academy. We're doing better than we were 5 years ago, but it still is a real challenge to maintain and recruit that line item.
Is that because of the pay? Is that because of the benefits? Is that because of the type of job it is? Because it's a Monday through Friday job, essentially, right?
It's a Monday through Friday, essentially 9 to 5, depending upon the position. We did an objective job analysis and gave a boost to the incoming salary a few years ago. We also added another step. They used to have to wait 2 years in order to get an increase. Now they wait 1 year. On the back end, for our more senior marshals, we added an additional step. So we've been trying to do things to recruit and maintain, but we are still challenged with it.
Are all of these armed?
No one's armed.
No one's armed. So it's not like they're trying to get qualified or going through post-training or anything like that. These are unarmed positions.
They're unarmed, although they go through training similar to post. They go through 17 weeks of training that's certified by the same organization that certifies law enforcement agencies. So it's rigorous. We lose a few during the academy, And then we lose people to other portions of our work as well, or they go to probation or court ops. We've had some retirements. And really the recruitment, this is something that's on continuous recruitment always. And it's a challenge to get a class of 20, but we focus on that. You know, we should be about 725 judicial marshals across our 35 courthouses, and we're 100 below that.
Thank you. Representative Walker.
Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for coming to testify, and great to see all of you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go into a couple of other things. Approximately how long ago did we raise the age of adult jurisdiction, and how long ago did we actually move it into judicial?
Brian just said to me, you got it. I wish Judge Conway was here. You got, okay, go ahead, Brian.
So raised age took place in two batches or two tranches. First one was in 2010, that added 16-year-olds to the juvenile justice system. And then in 2012, we added 17-year-olds. The full transition of juvenile justice responsibilities took place in 2018 when the training school was closed, and those functions for post-adjudication, secure confinement, and other associated treatment services was transferred from the Department of Children and Families to the judicial branch.
Okay, I think maybe I should probably say, maybe Gary might want to, Mr. Roberge might want to answer some of these, but approximately how many children do you serve now under the juvenile justice system in the courts?
Sure. I will defer to Executive Director Gary Rupert.
Thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gary Roberge, the Executive Director of the Judicial Branch's Court Support Services Division. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. We currently have, this morning, we had 53 boys and 11 girls in our residential centers, and we have approximately in our community-based residential centers another maybe 25 between the programs, and then we have approximately 15 to 1,700 under juvenile probation supervision.
15 to 1,700
100, yeah, 1,500
Yeah.
to 1,700
in the fields,
in the field, in the community.
community,
Yes.
okay. Since the time that we transferred over to you from Department of Children and Families, approximately how much of your budget can you tell me you think has increased since then?
You know, I have it right here, and we were going over this in preparation for this, and I would say with the transfer and everything, the increase on the juvenile side is close to 50%.
Close to 50%.
I believe so,
So
yeah.
we never got a full transfer.
40%.
We never really got a full flux of funds in that.
I'm not certain how much came over from DCF. I'm talking about what was added to our budget with respect to what we had in our budget for previous juvenile services.
Do we have a facility for girls?
We do, and it's the Journey House out in Mansfield.
Mhm.
That's presenting an issue for us at this time because we just rebid it, and the current provider did not respond to that. So we're going to have to find another provider to provide the services, another location to actually operate the program. The good news is the current provider has assured us that they'll continue to do business with the branch until we're in a position to do that. But we do have a secure facility for girls.
And I think that we had a lot of people from JJPOC who have been pushing for us to provide a facility for girls currently right now.
Yes.
Okay, so I looked at the budget and in the juvenile budget, in the alternatives to incarceration, the juvenile alternatives to incarceration, there was a whopping 4% added in there. Can you attribute what that 4% was for?
Most of that the additions to both sides of our budget, but specifically on the juvenile side too. So in the past few years, we had an additional appropriation for credible messengers, right? We added that service.
Incredible Messengers is?
Credible Messengers is a youth violence prevention program. They deal with our highest risk kids that are out in the community, and they're mentors, and they're with the kids for a good part of the day, weekends, 24/7 position. And we have it in 4 locations right now. So Hartford, Waterbury, Bridgeport, and New Haven. And very good service, good program. So thank you all for that. I appreciate that. And then the other increases and the modest increases have been for COLAs.
For COLAs,
Yeah.
okay. And we don't have a credible messenger service out in the eastern part of Connecticut, I gather.
We do not at this
Ah.
time. We do not.
Just want to raise that
Yeah.
point up. Yeah, I wanted to bring it forward. I guess I'm asking currently right now. Do you feel, no, let me ask this a better. If we had additional funds, could that be addressed to the programs that we have not been able to totally execute around the state? And approximately how much or how many do you think we need to be providing? And my other question is, in doing so, no, just answer that for now. Okay.
Okay, so I think on the juvenile side, the two priorities that we do have is to expand credible messengers statewide.
Mhm.
And we'd also like to get family and children reintegration mentors into our residential centers. We currently have that in our Hamden Secure program, but we do not have it in our Hartford and our Bridgeport residential centers for kids that are in the Regions programs in those two areas. I don't have an exact number for that. I have an approximate, so if I could give you that number at a later time or in the work groups, I would appreciate that.
Okay, no, I would like to continue this in the work groups, but, and then do we have waiting lists for any of the programs that we are executing right now?
We do, and some of our respite beds, we have, that CJR is operating for us. We have a wait list on. Our biggest wait list that we're dealing with is really around our MST services, the intensive in-homes clinical services for kids and their parents or guardians. That's where we see the biggest wait list that we have. We're able to get kids into our LINK program, which is really our flagship program for the branch on the juvenile side that we contract for in a timely manner. So I think it's really more around the lines of MST.
And as you know, a lot of people have been concerned about some of our kids out in the community. Part of the problem, I think, is we got to make sure that everybody gets the ages of the people that they identify and say are as problems, because I think a lot of them are much more in the early 20s than they are in the juvenile areas. But would you state that do you feel that if you had more funding, we would have better access in some of the neighborhoods that we're not serving now? And would that be enough, or are there other areas that you want to expand in?
No, I think again, if we could invest in additional credible messenger services, that would certainly be beneficial. And the majority of our kids are going back to the cities, the bigger cities, right? So again, the family and children reintegration mentors would be of significant value to the branch and the work we do on the juvenile side of our business.
Okay, yes.
And Representative Walker, just to be clear, we requested 26.5 million in 26 and 27 just to maintain current levels of service. There's no expansion there. There's no new programs. That's just the cost to maintain our current level of services.
And those were, that sheet was submitted to our committee today so that we can have that for our work group, correct?
Right.
And that's just for maintenance.
Just
Yeah.
its current level of services.
And what about for mental health services? Is that included in that too?
It is. So we provide our mental health services through our adult behavioral health contracts on the adult side. So that's a contract that the branch has with approximately 35 providers throughout the state for clinical services. So they do substance abuse and mental health services. And when that goes out to rebid next year, and that's how we got into this situation, because every time we rebid for services, the costs go up, but we haven't gotten an additional appropriation over years, right, to address the cost of operations going up. So that's really what this is addressing. I'll give you a quick example of that, Representative Walker. So we just bid for the alternative in the community programs on the adult side. So I said LINK was our flagship on the juvenile. The alternative in the community is our flagship on the adult side. We send thousands of referrals to the AICs, and we've been operating AICs for close to 35 years now.
What's an AIC?
An alternative in the community program. So it's a program where the court refers individuals that are in the court process, and they get cognitive behavioral therapy. So things like reasoning and rehabilitation, building resilience. We have moving on and living safely for women that are in this system. And we have basic needs. We have treating addiction disorders. So it's a one-stop shop around the state. We have 17 locations. We actually had to cut 3 a couple of years ago because of some funding issues we were having. So they provide in the community services, and clients go there maybe 2-3 times a week for classes. But we just rebid it. And in the next 5-year cycle, we're on a 5-year bid plan with the AICs. It's 5.1 more, per year to run that program based on the bids that we just got back that are going to be operationalized on July 1st, the beginning of the next fiscal year. So through all of our contracts, programs, and services, that's the type of snowball that's been going on over the years. So we have a much higher cost of doing business now than we did, in 2015.
And on the adult side, are you experiencing the same problem with funding that's being provided to you through OPM for their services? Are your services, is there a long waiting list in adult services in probation?
So in the alternative in the community program, no. But in our residential network, so we partner with Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. We have an MOA with them, and we fund a number of beds. Actually, it's 150 beds that we currently fund. We have, and the majority of the individuals that utilize that service, substance abuse, some are co-occurring disorder beds, predominantly substance abuse, are coming out of the Department of Correction, right? So, just last year, we placed 805 individuals into our residential network. We always have a wait list for that particular service. And in our adult behavioral health contracts that I was speaking to earlier on the adult side that provide the higher level clinical service, we certainly have wait lists there. I think that can be attributed to the fact that our providers are having some staffing issues, getting staff in and keeping staff, retaining staff once they're in, and there's been a lot of turnover. So it's not a negative reflection on the providers. It's just the way that they're currently doing business. So we do have a wait list in that particular area of our business as well.
And also for many of the people on probation and our juveniles, connecting them to workplace settings for job employment and training. Do you have any of those types of programs available to them?
So we do some job development within our AICs now, although we're cutting back on that. We do have a component of that for juveniles in the LINK program, where we do some basic job readiness development. We work very closely with the work investment boards, especially around summer employment for the kids when they're out of school. We have an MOA with the Department of Labor where we fund a certain number of positions for kids, predominantly over the summer, but throughout the year as well. So we do a good job there, I think, on the juvenile side. And on the adult side, it's really what we can do in partnership with either Department of Labor or the workforce investment boards that we work with. But we do have contacts and interaction and collaboration with those service providers throughout the state.
Thank you for your answers. One other thing that I remember learning in our juvenile justice in JJPOC was the fact that a large percentage of our kids, are coming from Department of Children and Families. These are kids that were duly committed both with us and with DCF, but they've been transferred out, like out of foster care and things like that. And I think the biggest fear I have is that if we don't address them right away, they will go deeper into the system. And so it's really important that we make sure that we create those services and create those stopgaps to stop, because the children that are coming from DCF were children that we were responsible for. And so therefore, we have to take very serious the fact that we are the parents of those kids and we're failing them because they're ending up in Department of Corrections. So I'm very disappointed that we did not get any funding in any of these lines. I look forward to going to the work group and looking and digging deep into it, because I think we need to, I keep hearing the ROI. What's the ROI and the funding and all that? Well, the ROI is that we save children's lives as opposed to saying that they're just going to go through the natural process of Department of Corrections. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Nuccio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I wanted to thank you guys for your very detailed response to my questionnaire. I love it when I get all that detail. I just want to confirm a couple of things if I can. Right now, you're saying basically you have funded for 3,750 positions, but you've also got 3,751 people there. So you basically have no vacancies based off of funding, but off of head count. So those are unfunded. The 523 vacancies that show up are basically unfunded at this point. Is that correct?
That's technically correct. There's an add-on to that we have a number of permanent part-time positions and temporary positions. And so while we have 3,751 permanent full-time positions that are identified under our position count, part of our personal services budget goes to fund those temporary positions and permanent part-time positions. So we do have the 500 plus permanent full-time positions, but we do utilize our funding in different ways.
Okay, so it looks like though, from the funded perspective, you're fully staffed for what you have funding for right now.
That is correct,
Right,
yes.
okay,
We do
so
not anticipate
The
lapsing any.
523 are like ghost positions. Like we have the head count for it, but we don't have the dollars.
Right.
Okay, all right. So that definitely helps. In your request, you have providing in here funding for victim support, and you have two very specific organizations directed for those dollars. I was wondering if you could give us some insight as to why these two specific organizations?
So those two lines in our budget, we did not make a specific request for that information, and those requests came out of OPM. So I would respectfully ask that questions on those two programs be directed to OPM.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for that information. I appreciate that. Of the 13, we're putting 13 new superior judges in. Do you know how many are currently retiring? Are these replacing or are these in addition?
So we're currently at about 163. Statutorily, we could have 185. So this will bring us up into the high 170s. We do always forecast retirements. We have a few that'll bring us through the end of 2025. But
Okay, so do you know how many are retiring by chance?
it's probably about 5.
5? Okay. Thank you for that information. I appreciate it. In regard to I noticed you have a note in here too, but in regard to the annualized 25 deficiencies and other expenses, we have $4 million, and in personnel services, we have 3.8 million. And I noticed looking at the sheet that you sent in, you're only lapsing $65,000 in personnel services. So the 3.8 million for the deficiency, what specifically is that for?
So that is very specifically to the class of Superior Court judges that was appointed in last spring, so a year ago, and was not funded through our budget because the budget was not reopened last year to put that funding in.
Okay, so, but if you're only lapsing 65,000, are you currently paying them?
We are currently paying them, and we'll be requesting deficiency appropriation for this fiscal year.
Okay, all right, that helps. And the 4 million that's under other, can you give me a little bit of breakdown on what's in that other charge?
Sure. So there's 4 primary areas that make up that, and actually our request was
7 million.
$7 million. So the request covers 4 primary areas. One is software. So just very briefly, we've moved over the last several years from a per license, buy it once for software license to a subscription model, as everybody knows. And so our software costs, we just have seen that grow significantly over the years. So that's one component. Another component is utilities, primarily electricity. Again, something that's being talked about a lot in this state. Another area is property management fees. And so these are contracts that we have for the maintenance and upkeep of our owned facilities, so our 35 courthouses that we maintain every day. And those costs have gone up significantly. We do pay standard wage through those contracts. And then the last area is projected lease increases. And so We have a window into when leases expire, and we have about 34, 35 leased properties. And so those leases kind of roll on different terms. And so we're projecting increases in those leases for FY 26 and 27.
Thank you for all that detail. I appreciate it. And to dig in a little bit more about what Representative Walker was just talking about, I've been looking at the juvenile alternative incarceration here and the expanding credible messengers. Do you know how much that would cost?
I'm going to pass to Gary Robers for that question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, Representative, I should have had that information here today. I do not, but I will certainly have it for the work group, or I will check my text messages the next time I get a break, because I'm sure the folks in the branch that are watching here have that information available and can get it to me.
Okay, I would definitely appreciate understanding how
eh,
much the expansion would cost and how much it would cost like by area. So if it was
Okay.
the east, the
Yeah.
west that doesn't have it, like how much it would be between the
Yeah.
two.
Okay, and we can certainly do that because we did it for JJPOC and we produced that for that body to review, and we cut it a few different ways because if we expand it to the entire population of juveniles, it's a big price tag. And then if we kind of just, narrow it down to certain target populations within the kids that we work with, obviously it gets less and less. So we have that, and we'll get that to you very, very quickly.
I appreciate that.
So, just so everybody is clear, any information requested by anybody goes to the administrator and then goes out to everybody, to include any emails or requests that we get from, that you may get from specific legislators, that all comes to the administrator so that it can be parsed out to all members of the subcommittee so that they can make similar decisions based on all information. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. So going back to that, the juvenile alternative, incarceration piece there in the dollars that you're looking for, it looks like in the lapses that you're lapsing about $491,000 this year in that specific program. And then specifically to youth violence, youth, service prevention, juvenile outreach, we're looking there at a little over $2 million of lapses. Is there a way to reallocate any of those dollars to increasing a program like Credible Messengers or the funds that you're looking for, the 750,000 here?
So thank you for that question. So the majority of the lapsing is going on with the earmarks that we fund through the youth violence prevention and a couple of other line items for those funds. So they come back from the community providers. And last year we were able to recoup those to offset a deficit we had last year on the juvenile side. And we're able to do that again this year of an anticipated deficit. So if that were structurally an annualized event, we certainly could use it for other reasons.
So can you, I guess I don't understand what you mean earmarks. What do you mean by that?
So community programs that are appropriated funds through the
Yep.
legislative process, and they come to the branch and we manage those. We don't manage those funds as we do our traditional contracts, but the funding comes to the branch and then we give it to the community provider, and they provide services to the kids around the state, and they provide us documentation that services were provided, and then we release the funds. So there's an appropriation for that service. And if those providers don't provide all the services that they said that they were going to do within the fiscal year, we're not releasing the funds, and that's what we're lapsing and giving back.
Okay, so is this a regular occurrence in these four? Because I just see there's a lot of need, and that's like over $2 million of lapses there that we could be using some other program initiatives if they're not consistently using them.
It varies from program to program, year by year, but there certainly are lapses every fiscal year. Absolutely.
Okay, do you think then you could provide like the last 4 or 5 years of what's lapsed in these areas here, so we can
Yeah.
see if there's any kind of trend?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, we lapsed in a couple of the other SIDS here a few years back, a fairly significant amount of money. But a lot of that was due to, COVID and just the difficulty in obtaining a generator for one of our facilities, just getting products, right? So there were some reasons built into that. And we were talking about that last year in this process when we testified that, that this was going to start to happen this fiscal year. We're going to see more of a deficit that we weren't going to be able to recoup with those lap savings, right? So we've always had an opportunity to try to mitigate some of the deficits that we had in previous fiscal years with that. But we'll certainly get you the money that's lapsed in each of these SID numbers.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think that's all thank you.
Thank you. Representative Gilchrist, followed by Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you both. In your testimony, when you're speaking to the programming and the $26.5 million that you requested, that was not included, is that connected? And then you brought up Journey House. Would Journey House be one of those programs that is grant funded through you all?
No, that would not include Journey House, but what it does include is we just rebid Journey House too. Okay, that contract. And the response that we received from the future provider that was awarded the contract is going to be a couple million more than we're currently paying this past. So that number is what we're projecting into the deficit. So the majority of the program is funded and will continue to be funded, but it's the increase in the cost of doing that particular service, providing that particular service that's gone up, that we're going to have to find within fiscal year 26 budget.
And I'm sorry, my question wasn't clear, but so when you're speaking about the judicial branch having a variety of programs for court-involved adults and youth,
Yes.
an example would be Journey House.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And so then when you mentioned how Journey House, and I don't want to throw them under the bus, I just think that this is helpful for the conversation.
Yeah.
They're not going to take the bid.
They did not respond to the RFP.
Did they explain why?
We've had conversations, and the organization that runs Journey House is interested in doing different type of work in that location and in that facility with youth around the state.
Have they ever expressed the concerns over the pay that they're able to give within the current contract? I guess what I'm trying to
Yeah.
get at is
Yeah.
in doing the work I do and learning from folks, the fact that Journey House works with victims of domestic minor sex trafficking and other girls who experience trauma that's incredibly severe and very hard to work with, and to have them all in one spot, just
Right.
even 13 is quite a bit.
Yes.
I've been told that the pay that unfortunately these contracts can allow these nonprofits to pay is so low that that's part of the turnover issue. Are you hearing that as well?
Yes, and not just specific to Journey House.
But in many of the
Yes.
programs?
Yes.
Okay. And then with that $26.5 million, is that across a few different line items, or is that one particular line item in your budget?
No, that's across the juvenile SID numbers that we have for appropriation, and then the adult ones as well. So it's multiple.
Okay, multiple.
Multiple.
Is there a way in the subcommittee, maybe you were already prepping that, to show us broken down by program?
Absolutely.
Okay, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. And sorry for the confusing way I started
no,
those questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Winfield.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I want to go back to the question that you were asked about the two particular agent organizations that were getting money on violence. So you didn't ask for those two particular organizations, but did you ask for money in violence to make up for that money that's kind of missing at this point?
We have in the past, outside of that process, yes.
What about this time? No? Yes?
Yes.
No? Yes?
Yes.
And was the number around the same? Because I don't know what your actual ask was.
No, we The same as what we're recouping from the.
No, the
earmark?
same as what's suggested here in the budget.
This is a little bit different on this spreadsheet than
Okay.
what we provided to OPM on the technical adjustment. We provided that in August. You want to take this? Okay.
Senator Whitfield, just to clarify, I think you're referring to the 1.25 million to each of the
Yep, you are
yeah,
on point.
victims. Yep. We did not request funds related to those specific services.
I'm asking not, yes, I know that was Mr. Roberge's answer earlier. I'm asking whether, was there a request for funds in general, and what was that request?
So in general, across programming, we requested an adjustment of $26.5 million, and that was across our adult alternatives and juvenile alternatives.
And so not specific to the organization, but there was no ask, like if I asked you how much of that would have been going towards this part of programming, could you tell me? Of the 26 million?
Specifically
No.
for victims,
Okay.
no.
That's fine. Because we do multiple things while we're sitting back here. When you were having or Mr. Roberge was having a conversation with Representative Walker, I missed what was turned over to the committee this morning, but before you clarify for me, that's a great opportunity for me to make a statement. Because the answer may be right in line with my statement, and I'm fine if that's the case. When I look at these budgets, particularly when I see a gap as big as the gap between what was requested and what's here, I actually have no idea how good of a job we're doing, right? There's a lot of stuff that could happen in that amount of money. And so if what was turned over was what you were actually asking, I'm very happy for that. But beyond you, if I'm involved in the process, I want to see what was asked for. I don't think myself, the committee, or the people of the state of Connecticut benefit from the mere fact that we put the numbers on the page. That's great, but it doesn't tell us what we have lost. And so we look at, in this instance, significantly less money, meaning significantly less programming, et cetera, that we are doing. And we may pat ourselves on the back, but your agency knows what it needs. And when you ask us for stuff, we should be able to look and make informed decisions. What we are doing is a decision that is significantly less informed for what's on this paper. And that's not directed at you, obviously. It's directed at the OPM and the Office of the Governor, just so I'm clear, so no one is mistaken what I'm saying. I am asking that everyone who comes before us, before you even sit down, recognize that that is what I would like turned over to me and this committee. But is that what, so the question is that what you were talking about being turned over?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Are you all set? Thank you. Representative Candelaria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few quick questions. When I look at the request for the judicial marshals, 120, how many vacancies do you currently have?
Yeah.
It depends
Give
on what
me a
number you
number.
want to use. I mean, if we had 725, we'd be happy. We should probably have 825. And I think there was a study maybe 10 years ago that earmarked it at 825. Even if we got close to 700,
Gotcha.
we had to make a lot of adjustments since we are depleted in the marshal staffing to our operations to accommodate this decrease.
Now, I remember in the past, you had contracted with off-duty police officers and other security for additional security. And I know you have budgeted for that. If you get the additional marshals, would you foresee still having the need for those additional officers?
So we haven't contracted with outside officers or state police or local police in quite some time. We do it on an as-needed basis if there's
Okay.
some, you
I
know,
remember
very,
in the last, when we went to this
Yeah.
round again, we alluded to that you were using
yeah, we-
officers.
right. We used extra officers in Bridgeport after the shooting. And we were down significantly as far as our marshal count. But we have not been doing that on a continual basis.
Okay, you have not.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're looking at 60 each biennium?
Right, 3 classes of 20 and 26 and 3 classes of 20 and 27.
Okay. And also just touching up upon your request of $26.5 million. I just want to know the impact. I know you made that request. That's not in the budget. I want to know the impact that that will have not receiving those dollars to
I
the
can turn that
services
over
that
to-
you'll be providing.
To Gary Roberge.
Okay, thank you, Judge. And thank you for that question. So it's going to be significant. We and ultimately Judge Bizzuto need to make a final decision, but it could include, so I spoke earlier that, we have 150 residential beds, right? That predominantly we fill with people coming out of the Department of Correction. We put 800 in those beds in the last year. We had 327 beds in 2012, and we had to cut beds years ago. So we may have to cut those beds again, which will have a significant impact not only on the clients that we serve in the courts, but on the Department of Correction and other unintended consequences. So residential treatment beds and, eliminating additional alternative in the community programs, eliminating or reducing transitional housing. We outside of the residential networks, we have approximately 150 residential beds for transitional housing, and we have a program for individuals with behavioral health issues that we fund transitional housing for. We have a couple other residential programs called Reach Beds that we partner with Department of Correction. So we may have to cut some of those beds. So I think it's a combination of community-based service and the beds that we fund in the branch, but it would be significant.
So it will be a massive impact based on what you're explaining now.
Yes.
Now, what would happen if, let's say, you do not get the funding? Who would provide these type of services? Do we know of any other nonprofits or any other philanthropic dollars available to do any of this?
Well,
No.
yeah, so, yeah. The answer is no. I mean,
Okay,
Department of Housing does a
that's what I
great,
wanted to hear.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think that Representative Gilchrist was looking at a number of answers to questions, and mine may dovetail off of hers or maybe similar. The federal government has Victims Against Crime Act funding that is forwarded out. And a number of years ago, there was a policy change at the federal government level, which essentially wiped out this funding for those programs. Do you know, and all of us in the legislature have been attempting to fund those programs at a level that keeps them moving forward. Survivors of homicide, DV services, and a number of other services relative to the end sexual violence and a number of other services. Where do we stand on the funding coming from the federal government, if any? And where do we stand on funding them broadly in the state?
So you're challenged by the same challenge that we have, and the VOCA funding has always been really volatile and even more so lately. They say it was always from fines and penalties from criminal convictions, and now they're settling cases, so it goes to the Treasury as opposed to VOCA. So we hear all sorts of different things, but Brian, you probably have the specifics on what the numbers are. I mean, we used to get probably $30 million every year to fund that line. And it's
Yeah, we've supplemented the federal funds with ARPA dollars, as this
Right.
committee knows, over the past several years, and those ARPA dollars are not going to be able to support that. So we're going to see a significant drop in the amount of available dollars that for FY26, and we do not know what the funding is going to look like thereafter.
I may be wrong, but I thought that we put some money into the general fund too, or to judicial. Did that not happen? Did somehow or another it get changed over to ARPA dollars? It's only been ARPA dollars.
ARPA dollars, yes.
And I have probably a sensitive question that, and I'm not intending to put anybody on the spot, but we all have constituents who face difficult circumstances and end up in front of you all on for a number of reasons. And like everybody else, I had a constituent that went before the courts, fought for their position and ultimately lost, and is serving a very long sentence, much longer than the plea bargain that he had as an 18-year-old. It took years to make it through the court system. Is it practice or is it policy to more to almost triple the amount of time if someone makes it through a court system than it does if they accepted a plea bargain that they disagreed with?
There is no policy such as that. I think,
Does it happen often?
well, I think the problem is that when we're talking about settlement,
Right,
there's a real bonus on the settlement side,
right.
right? And then when they go to trial, it's the court looking at the case anew and had no part in that settlement negotiation. That certainly is the policy.
But you know about it.
No, the judge
Never knows
knows
about
nothing
it?
about that. That judge would be disqualified if the judge participated in the plea negotiations or knew something about the plea negotiations.
So if that came up in a court during court processes, does that negate that process from continuing? I'm really trying to understand because I've read all the transcripts on this particular case and I don't see the value of what we did.
Mhm.
I don't think it anywhere near covers public safety under any circumstances, and I see a great injustice, and I have probably 50 people in a town that now think that they can never trust the court system at all. And I mean, at all. They
Yeah.
are, they don't see it at all. They think that this was a grave injustice, and I really am trying to struggle because I consider one of my jobs is to say that we have good governance, and you are very much an important part of that good governance. And this case just doesn't seem to meet the criteria.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to sit back and
I
speculate at
I don't
all on
want to
that, but
put you in the position to discuss a specific case, but I know that this is what the family believes now.
right. But just so the process is clear, there's a judge who would do the plea bargaining and an entirely separate judge who would try the case.
Well, thank you for that. I just, I was never more disappointed in government until that day. So I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. Representative Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nice seeing you again. You just said that that you have 170 judges right now.
It's somewhere around 163 or 165, 165.
Okay, and those 165, you have, they cover all the courts here in Connecticut.
That's right.
So can you tell me why, if you have judges, they are covering all the courts, then why they are canceling, for inmates, they are waiting to, to come to court? And why, if you have judges, they are covering all the courts, why then have to be in Zoom?
So that's a couple of questions. And I could tell you, Representative Gonzalez, across all our 4 divisions, criminal, family, civil, and juvenile, our pending inventory is at a 10-year low. So it peaked very high during COVID, and then it's decreased across all of our divisions back to well before pre-COVID numbers. So the dockets are definitely moving. There's some things are done remotely, and oftentimes you hear it's the defendant who doesn't want to come to court. I mean, when you see a defendant appear in court at 10 o'clock in the morning, that particular person was probably woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning, gotten a DOC bus that took them to a centralized location that was thereafter picked up by a judicial marshal van and then taken out maybe to 2 different court stops before they appear in court. So there's, some things that should be handled probably without the appearance of the defendant, if it's a status conference, if it's just a scheduling conference. Certainly if there's anything significant, and really for the most part, criminal defendants are being transported to the courts. It's not, there's some Zoom or Teams activity, but that's for really sort of perfunctory matters, nothing that, where a significant right or even a mild right would attach.
In other cases, they are not inmates, regular citizen. They also are going through those Zoom meetings, and we have to understand that we have a lot of people in our community. They don't know how to navigate a computer. They don't have a computer, and I think this is very unfair. And if you have judges that are covering all the courts, I don't see a reason, even though you explain, because, these days it's about COVID. Well, what happened with COVID still, affecting, which I think about and I see after so many years. But there are a lot of people, they are going through some problems because they don't know or they don't have a computer.
If someone doesn't have the equipment or the hardware or the bandwidth, that's going to be in person, Representative Gonzalez. That's a simple request, say it was scheduled to be remote, and then the court learns by way of the litigant notifying the court they don't either have the equipment or the bandwidth. That would be something that's conducted in person. Most of our court matters are now back live in person. There are some things that are still done remote. But as I said before, those are kind of like status conferences, scheduling conferences, and things such as that would be done remotely. But there's no, any request by a litigant, I would hope is accommodated by the court. We don't have any rules out there saying this has to be remote, this has to be in person. We've left it to the discretion of the court and of course, the people who appear before the court to make their preference known.
And you have people out there telling that to the defendant or, whatever have to go to court. Are you letting that know? Because I got a call and by the way, I got involved in a case because they didn't want to give her a Zoom meeting, a Zoom hearing, and I got involved. So I would like to know when this is gonna end. And in my opinion, after so many years, we've been dealing with COVID, and everybody use COVID as an excuse for everything these days. But I would like to know, again, so many judges are covering the court, when this is going to stop. When going to have this hearings in court.
Evidentiary hearings and trials are in court. I don't know that we'll ever get rid of the platform, the Teams platform to do things remotely, because it's a great convenience for a lot of people. If you recall pre-COVID, someone would go to court for one simple motion in family and be there all day waiting. Now they get a specific time. Everyone shows up remotely at that specific time. They have their hearing that goes for an hour and they're done, as opposed to taking an entire day off from work or getting daycare because they sit in court all day waiting for their case to be called. So there's some real advantages to the remote platform. I don't see it ever going away. I mean, it's certainly not relied upon as much now as it was during COVID. That's for certain.
Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Judge. Thank you very much. Appreciate all the work that you all do. It's difficult work and I just don't know that it's good. Although I do want to get from you guys a list of capital projects, and I'd like you to add to the list the old New London.
I heard all about it.
So
I
I
heard all
was in
about it.
there visiting the judges down there, and I couldn't believe the water that was running through the system. I asked them if they needed a whole new building. Seeing as we don't want to get rid of historic buildings, can we get a new HVAC system in the building?
Well, there was a new HVAC system just put in I don't know if you went to GA10, the other beautiful building, but it's crumbling. But I know all about New London. I knew
Yeah.
you were there. There's two proposals out for New Haven and Bridgeport,
Right.
which are in serious trouble, Bridgeport. But to be honest with you, from my perspective, New London needs a centralized courthouse more than any of those other jurisdictions. So Senator Ross, is that something that you're we're pursuing. You'll get the support from the judicial branch for sure.
Okay, if you could give me an idea of what you mean by a
Okay.
centralized location, I would really like to talk to you about it offline because I'd like to do something relative to that.
Yeah,
And
yeah, when I mean centralized, there's probably 4 or 5 facilities, whether it's administrative buildings or 3, 4 courthouses,
Right.
all over the place.
Right,
You know, having everything under one roof is efficient and it's the right thing to do. And actually, I know the Chief Justice, the new Chief Justice,
Yeah,
is
he-
very much interested in looking at that.
I
So we'll
looked
be in
at, I
touch.
said, oh, don't go because since I started talking, now other people want to fix courthouses too.
No, my finger's on here, see?
1, 2, 3 here.
Representative Walker.
Yeah, I don't, I'm not talking about courses. Did we ask you how many dollars you think are in your budget that are federal, that are vulnerable? Did we ask you that?
You don't, but of course,
I know. I
Brian and his
figured-
group got it all together down to the penny. We could certainly submit that to you or,
But you can give us an idea.
so we have it in categories, 4 different categories.
All those.
High
places?
risk, medium risk, low risk, no risk. So it might be giving you a number, a ballpark.
Maybe you can show some of the other agencies how to do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, we like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Stop it.
thank you for the question, Brian Hill. We have, approximately $94 million that we see as at risk. Some low risk, some moderate risk, some high risk. And it's important to note that that includes about $33 million of ARPA dollars that we have obligated per the rules, but can be spent over this year and next. And we included that in the total because we don't know if that could possibly be clawed back.
Yeah.
So yeah, about $94 million.
About 94. Okay.
It's a large amount.
Okay. All right. Okay. Those courthouse people, what do you want?
Representative Nuccio.
Thank you.
I do want to say, I was just actually down in the Vernon, I was touring in the Vernon area, and they also have like 4, I think,
Mhm.
4 or 5 different small itty bitty locations all over the place, and they were looking at upgrades to their facility and consolidation. So I don't know, are they on your list?
I think they're going to be on the chief's list and really something like Vernon Rockville, and I'm not sure how you feel about this. Shouldn't that be collapsed in with Wyndham? I mean, there's
Well-
Wyndham scattered all over the place with 4 or 5 courthouses. Rockville's the same. They're in close proximity, or maybe it's Hartford. I just think that for a state our size with 35 courthouses, most of which are in very poor repair, we spend a ton of money just band-aiding those facilities. And this is something that's very, of interest to the Chief Justice, kind of looking at the state as a whole, and coming up with a plan for courthouses, which would, of course, I know Rockville's got some pretty shabby buildings as well.
Some of them are, yeah, I didn't even know that they were courthouses.
Yeah, I
but,
Or we're in strip malls, we're
Yeah,
on top of
literally.
police departments. Yeah,
Exactly,
it's,
like it was.
it's a
I was like,
patchwork.
That's a court, yeah, I know. So I think that's a little bit of an issue there. And I think, looking at, the fact that all the habeas cases are handled out of that one courthouse for the state. My concern with combining it with Wyndham or Hartford is just, Vernon especially tends to be, it's a lower socioeconomic area. And, I don't know if you've been out that way, but if you're trying to drive from Wyndham to Rockville, there's no public transportation, and transportation is an issue out there. So I'd be a little wary of collapsing it into Hartford or Wyndham, because then how am I getting people to where they need to go, especially domestic violence victims and stuff like that are serviced through
Right.
a lot of those courts. So
Yeah, I've been to all those locations. When I'm driving out to Wyndham, I'm thinking I'm going to see the Atlantic Ocean in a few minutes. And we're in the car forever from Hartford. So I
listen,
get it.
plenty
It's
like
out in the
that.
middle of nowhere. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank
May I
you.
quickly just introduce the executive team because
Oh,
these
yes,
are
please do.
this is the brains behind the organization.
Okay.
Of course, Brian and Ron Woodard from our administrative services. Everyone knows Gary Roberge from Court Support Services. Lucio DeLuca heads our IT, and Ty Erickson, Court Operations. And I'm lucky to have all these people support. the
We're
court
we're all
administrator.
lucky.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. You have a great team.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Oh, wait. Sorry. Representative Johnson. She has 2 minutes because the next group's supposed to be up. So Representative Johnson.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for your presentations. And just you mentioned combining Wyndham. I represent Wyndham, and the courthouse was closed there, and My constituents have to go either primarily to Putnam and or to Danielson, depending on what the issue is. And I know that the ride from Wyndham to Rockville is a lot shorter than if you go up to Putnam or if you go to Norwich. So I've often thought if there was a way to make the courts accessible depending on the type of case and maybe where the person has family members or something like that where they could get a ride, because many of the people in my district don't have any transportation to and from these areas. So sometimes they go 8 in the morning and don't get back till after 5 in the evening if they're going to court. And it is it seems almost like Norwich and Rockville are closer than Putnam. So if you have any comments about that, I'd be glad to talk to you afterwards. But thank you, Madam Chair, and whatever you might have for ideas, I'd be glad to entertain.
Well, look, as I said, the Chief Justice is very interested in looking in the courthouses. But Representative Johnson, a case just as that is kind of what I was explaining to Representative Gonzalez. We do have a remote platform. So as opposed to that person wasting the entire day, not only with travel, but sitting in court, that's where the platform, I think, has a lot of value. And it's going to vary on the person and what's at stake and whether they want to be there in person or not. But if it's something that's quite easy, that's why we have that remote platform for people to take advantage of. It was really, when we first developed it, it was way more about the people coming to court than the judges sitting there. We were in the building sitting there. We didn't want to bring people in, so we provided this remote platform, and it continues to have that kind of utility depending upon the case and depending upon the circumstance.
Thank you, Judge Rizzuto.
Thank you for
everyone.
that. And I did go to the court and speak to them about that as well, but I thank you for that. And thank you, Madam Chair.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thanks, guys. Up next is Division of Criminal Justice, Chief State's Attorney Patrick Griffin. Chief State's Attorney Griffin, the floor is yours. Or let me see if we have any questions right away. Maybe you'll get off really easy and nobody will ask any questions, so we won't have anything to do. We'll just say it's very good. How are you doing with staffing?
Well, my budget request largely revolves around staffing, Senator. And so I'd like to go into the two principal requests in some.
Go ahead.
So good afternoon, representatives and distinguished members of the Joint Committee on Approps. My name is Patrick Griffin, and I am the Chief State's Attorney. Here with me today is our team. To my left is John Rosado, who is the Deputy Chief for Administration. Kevin Lawler is present. He is the Deputy Chief for Operations. Our Legislative Liaison, Ann Canoyer, is present, and our Director of Finance, Valerie Clark, is present. I would like just the committee to note that over the last 2 years alone, the division prosecutors have disposed of almost 220,000 criminal and motor vehicle cases. Further, they have reviewed and approved thousands of search and seizure warrants and arrest warrants. And as the chief law enforcement officials of their jurisdictions, the 13 states' attorneys have likewise consulted on and supervised hundreds of criminal investigations. Over the past several years, our workload has increased substantially and without any appreciable increase in our resources. And I must report to you that this has significantly impacted division employee morale, and in my opinion, does jeopardize our ultimate ability to fulfill our constitutional, statutory, and ethical obligations. I'm going to limit my discussions to two areas. The division's first request relates to our responsibilities under the Transparency Bill 1959, which requires DCJ to collect data and to transmit that data to OPM. As you all are aware, on August 7, 2020, the following unanimous passage in the House and Senate, Governor Lamont signed the bill. I have to note that at the time that the law was signed, DCJ did not possess a digital case management system. And in fact, DCJ did not even begin its timed rollout, and I use the term timed rollout, until January of 2021. The DCJ management or case management system was not originally designed to deliver data to an outside agency. It is an internal system designed to enhance communication between and among prosecutors statewide and ultimately replace paper files. This is at present an aspirational goal because paper files continue to be in place in the criminal courts. The case management system, however imperfect, has become our only mechanism by which we can deliver our data to OPM to comply with Public Act 1959. Candidly, the alternative would be to deliver over 295,000 individual documents to OPM each year. That's clearly something that we can't do. Our case management system is not, and I have to repeat, is not a real-time data entry system. And what I mean by that is that DCJ staff, in addition to their other duties and work responsibilities, must manually enter the required data points into the system following a court appearance. So we're currently using the paper system, paper files, and then upon disposition, entering the required data points of Public Act 1959 into case management. I submit to this committee that our agency has demonstrated good faith and has made strenuous efforts to comply with our statutory obligations pursuant to 1959. I point out that in 2021, our data entry rates for case management related to the required data points of Public Act 1959 were 16%. Today, they stand at over 88%. It will never be 100% because it is not a real-time data entry, and so it's a snapshot in time at any given point. This increase has been made possible by the extensive use of temporary employees to assist with case management data entry. Those employees were paid for using pandemic-era emergency funding, which unfortunately has run out on December 31st of last year. I report to you that without additional resources related to case management for data entry, it is difficult for us to conceive how we can meet our statutory obligations pursuant to Public Act 1959 going forward. We are requesting to that end 19 data entry positions for each of the courthouses across the state. In addition, the division would ask for one supervisor to monitor the data entry folks for training and work standards. We estimate that the increase to the budget would be $1,184,702 for fiscal year 2026 and the same amount for fiscal year 2027. The second area that I'm asking you to consider is for your support to fund additional personnel to assist us with addressing the increased volume of digital evidence and its related impact on our discovery requirements. As you know, discovery in criminal cases is governed by federal and state constitutions, statutes, rules of practice, and our rules of professional responsibility. A prosecutor must disclose all exculpatory information or material in its possession to the defense, even if a defendant or defense attorney doesn't make the request. The state's duty to disclose exculpatory evidence applies not only to evidence known to us, in other words, known to the prosecutor handling the case, but extends to any member of the prosecution team, which includes the police. The Police Accountability Bill, for example, requires that all police departments utilize and maintain both body-worn cameras and dashboard camera devices. I must report to you that our analysis shows that the division can expect up to a staggering 165,000 hours of body-worn camera video alone based upon the number of arrests that take place in the state on an average year. Body-worn camera video does not replace written reports, but rather it adds additional work for our staff to review. Over the additional hours, the additional hours represents a 16% increase to the daily workload of our prosecutors. I ask you to consider that a prosecutor must review the footage for myriad reasons, not least of which is to make sure the defendant is properly charged, or even to determine whether the charges should remain in place at all. To determine if the body-worn camera video contains any exculpatory evidence, as I've already noted, to determine if there's inconsistent statements, to determine if there's been a failure to make identification, to identify additional witnesses. I have to stress that the increased use of digital and video evidence is not limited to body-worn cameras and dashboard cameras. Connecticut General Statutes 5410, for example, requires police departments to electronically record all custodial statements of suspects with Class A and B felonies. Many departments across the state have extended this practice for all statements, whether from a defendant or a witness. These statements can range from a few minutes to many hours in length. All that video must be reviewed by a prosecutor. So prior to my appointment as the Chief State's Attorney, I served in the capacity as the State's Attorney for the Judicial District of New Haven. There, all witness statements were taped. You might have a witness statement that is 11, 12 hours long. What I'm submitting to this committee is that the State's Attorney's Office cannot meet its obligation by simply taking a summary from the police department about an 11 or 12-hour video. We've got to look at it. In addition, we have seen an exponential increase in use of digital evidence across the full spectrum of criminal cases, to include third-party videos such as private and public surveillance cameras, to include Ring cameras. Obviously, cell phone extractions and computer data analysis is prevalent in many cases, and often such evidence is crucial to a fair resolution of the case. To support the review of the larger volume of digital evidence, I am respectfully requesting that the hiring of 10 prosecutors and 10 paralegals and 1 IT administrator to manage the associated digital evidence. We estimate that the increase to the budget to be $1,846,850 for 2026 and the same amount for 2027. I fully recognize that we're asking for a lot of resources, and I want you to know that we did not make this request without considerable thought and considerable debate. But I think I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't come before this committee and share the very significant concerns I have about our ability to meet our statutory obligations. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. The two numbers were, what was the first request number?
The first request number was for the 19 data entry positions and 1 supervisor, $1,184,702 for fiscal year 2026 and 2027.
And the other one is 1,000,000.
$1,846,850.
Senator Winfield.
I appreciate the ask. And we've had this conversation because fortunately I get to have this conversation with you here and over in Judiciary. What you said to us suggests that at least some part of this is required on your part by decisions made not by the legislature, but by some of those police departments, and part of it's made because of things we've done. I would like a breakdown of, if possible, of how much of it is what, right? So you said there's a requirement for certain of these witness statements to be recorded, but it's not a requirement on all of them. It's what they've chosen to do, and that means that in order for you to do your job, you have to do some things.
Yeah. So the way I can answer that, I don't know that I can give you a specific breakdown here. I mean, we can probably get some information for the working group.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not asking right now.
But let me answer in general terms, Senator. If a police department tapes a statement from a witness, I've got to look at it, right?
Mhm.
Period. If it's 12 hours or 14 hours in length, and we then get an arrest warrant, our people have to look at the arrest warrant and compare the statements contained in the arrest warrant to see if they're consistent, because the arrest warrant will be a summary of a 12-hour video.
I fully understand what you're saying. My point is, when you are asking us for the money, I want to know how much of that is compelled by what we've done versus choices made outside of the legislature, because as you know, these are complicated things to fund, even if they're the right thing to fund. And I want to make sure that at the very least we're covering, if we can get there, the stuff that we have mandated,
Gotcha.
right? So I think it's only fair that we have that kind of breakdown, so
Yes,
that
sir.
it's not a yes or no
No,
absolute.
I understand. And anecdotally, the 19 data entry folks would be directly related to the Public Act 1959.
I hear that. I would like to see the data.
Yep.
On the report that gave me some a little bit of a headache when I woke up one day and realized we did not receive the 2024 data report pursuant to what we did in 2019. You're asking us for more money to be able to live up to your responsibilities there as well.
Correct.
Well, you're going to get asked this question one way or the other. I think I want you to do that. I'm pretty sure I want you to do that. but I'm also baffled as to the situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
And I know this is appropriations, but you're asking for money, and I want to make sure that when we give you money to do something, that task is actually followed through.
Yep.
And so someone authorized you not, or compelled you not to do what the law says, and I don't even know where that authorization comes from. Can you clarify that a little for me as we go into the working group?
I'm gonna just, can you rephrase so I'm clear? Can I
It
clarify?
is my understanding that you were told that we were going to pause what we were doing as it relates to your reporting requirements. I don't even know how that's possible. So I would like a little clarity as I'm thinking about the amount of money that we're going to think about towards the effort you would like us to make. Because I feel like at some point along the way, someone decided we weren't going to do what the law says, and I don't want to give money to something that someone has some authority that I don't even know where it comes from.
Right. Well, let me be clear. I didn't pause anything. And that decision was made by OPM.
So-
And
So I want I don't want to speed past that. So you didn't pause anything. What does that mean? Does that mean that the report was completed?
I don't do the report, sir. We transfer the data to OPM.
Okay.
And because there was ongoing litigation, I don't want to speak for OPM, but there was ongoing litigation. And so they paused the transfer of our data. So for the first time, 2023 data goes into the 2024 report, right? So 2023 is the first year, my first full year as the chief state's attorney. And in that year, our data entry rates rose to 80%. Again, as I pointed out, it'll never be 100% because it's not in real time.
I get it. That makes sense.
So I was advised, because of ongoing legislation or ongoing litigation, I should know that word, right?
You should.
Thank you, Senator. Ongoing litigation, that they paused it, right?
So when I read about you being told about the pause, it's just you being informed of the pause.
Correct, sir.
Right. Okay. All right.
Correct, sir.
Okay.
And as you know, you've read the report, right? It's been produced. So there's a second report that should be out for June, right? For 2024 numbers. So the report that came out is 23. So it's 1 year behind, right? So 2024 is 23 numbers, 2025 is 24 numbers. And we expect the other report out to go to the Criminal Justice Commission for July.
Okay.
Or we're hopeful.
All right. I'm done for now, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative Nuccio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for coming. I have a few questions I was hoping you could help clarify. In relation to the body cam footage, if there's body cam footage attached, whether it be a warrant or an ongoing case,
Yeah.
it has to be watched, correct? Like, it's not optional to not watch it.
You're asking me directly. In my opinion, it's crucial.
Okay.
And just to put a point of clarification, we're talking about everything from breaches of peace to murders, right? And so you might have a breach of peace with 2 officers, 2 body cameras, 20 minutes. You might have an assault 1, robbery 1, murder with 30 plus officers, multiple body cameras picking up different areas or different aspects of the investigation. Plus neighborhood canvases that would follow. You could be talking hundreds of hours in the major cases and minutes in the minor cases. But to direct the answer to you, in my opinion, to fulfill our statutory ethical obligations, we need to look at the body cams.
Right, and I would say that, like, as you've mentioned, that's for all parties involved, whether it be the person being charged or the person, that was doing the arrest at that time, to cover all bases. So in cases like this, what do you estimate is the amount of time you have now had to dedicate to reviewing all of this digital footage in relation to the request for, if I'm looking at this you're looking at almost 30.
So we've done a breakdown on body worn camera,
Mhm.
and we estimate 165,000 hours of video. Deputy Chief Rosado at my request also did a breakdown using the most serious offenses. And if I might defer to John for a moment.
Sure, Representative, there's attachment B to our testimony, breaks down by the level of crime, felonies and misdemeanors, all the way down to infraction. The average number of hours of video for each, obviously that's an average. You know, you're going to see a lot more hours involved in the serious felonies and in the misdemeanors. As Chief Griffin said, it's a matter of minutes of video. The other, and it bears repeating, if you have a serious crime or like something like an assault 1, you might have 5 or 6 police officers coming to the scene with their cameras on. So you know, if one officer has 1 hour of video, you now have 6 hours because you have 6 officers there. And that's really important too, because different angles, one officer's camera may pick up something that somebody says. That's really important to whether or not they get charged.
And if I just give an anecdote that to really put a fine point on this, a number of years ago, I tried a very serious homicide, a double homicide. And there were many body cameras, officers at the scene, and a woman was taken out of her house. Initially, the police reported that the woman said, "I stabbed them." It was 2 children. And that went into what we call the Mincy warrant, which is the crime scene warrant. And that narrative was embedded in the police reports. You with me?
Yep. My
At-
daughter's a trooper. I'm all about this.
Okay.
Got it.
So now, as the case begins to unfold through pretrial negotiations, defense is making a claim of not guilty by reason of insanity. And we began to go back and listen to the tapes. And we pick up off of one tape, not "I stabbed them, I saved them." What is that? That is exculpatory because it went directly to the defendant's defense. We pointed it out to the defense. You can't just dump hundreds of hours of video, in my opinion, on defense attorneys and then say, "We've done our job," right? We take our job very serious, but we have ethical, statutory, constitutional obligations. It's not just about putting people in prison. So that's an anecdote, but other cases where we've seen misconduct by the police on reports, we've seen witnesses make statements that were not picked up in police reports. As you know, we're not police officers with briefcases. We are prosecuting attorneys. The courts call us ministers of justice. We want to live up to that title, and we need help to do it though.
Okay, I understand that. So going back to when we mandated body cam on everybody, were you given an increase in headcount going back that far in relation to all of this new digital evidence?
No, ma'am.
No. Okay. That's very interesting. And then the other question that I have is comparing your budget to the public defender's budget. Can you talk a little bit about the differences, the caseload differences, and why you would see these 2 areas having such significantly different budgets?
Well, I'm compelled to point out that when you examine our budget in a side-by-side comparisons with the public defender's budget, our budget is $61,671,731 versus the public defender's budget of $92,500,000. That is a $30 million difference. I would point out to you that prosecutors handle 100% of the cases, from speeding tickets, infractions, all the way to murder cases, as compared to approximately 63% of the dockets by the public defenders. Further, I would point out that our budget requires currently that we give a $3 million holdback, while the public defender's holdback is $632,000. Our position count is 505. The public defender's position count is 491. Let me break that down a little bit for you, though. Go to GA 23, where my former office. That's New Haven, GA, one of the busiest GAs in the state. 17 public defenders versus 10 prosecutors. Go to GA 2 in Bridgeport, one of the busiest GAs in the state. 17 public defenders versus 9 prosecutors. We're spread very thin. When we're spread thin, we will make mistakes. When you're talking about the volume of cases that come in each year, we will make mistakes.
Can you send us those details?
Yes.
And then the other question that I have is, you said some police departments are recording interviews that are not A and B felonies, which
Yes.
is not required by the law. Don't all interviews essentially need to be recorded now because the law requires the interaction would that member be recorded?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's a nuance, right? So the body worn camera law requires interviews to be body cammed, right? Before that law went into effect, 5410, I think was in 2015, 2016 required all A and B felonies. So effectively, all interviews are being taped,
So,
either body cam or inside the department.
okay, so we have to record them. And as you said, if they're being recorded, they have to be reviewed.
You have,
And
you know, I have to say this is important. You know, when you get a warrant, and you're reviewing a warrant, the warrant will generally summarize, because we don't have written statements in. Where years ago, if you had a written statement, you could take the written statement or a portion of and drop it in exactly into the warrant in quotes. Today, officers summarize what was said. Well, words matter. And if you're summarizing it, I think it's incumbent upon us to know exactly what was said. These interviews are not linear often in nature. And what I mean by that is somebody may come in and say, I didn't see anything. And then 10 minutes later say, okay, I saw it, but I don't know who did it. And then 20 minutes later, okay, I saw it. I know who did it, but I don't want to say. And then at some point identify someone. But that's a linear progression. It also may be in reverse. Do you understand what I mean? And
oh,
so
absolutely.
bedded in that 12 hours could be crucial details, both for the state and inculpatory evidence. It's my job, right? As the chief state's attorney, as prosecutors, we are seeking to prosecute, and I make no apologies for that. But on the other hand, if a witness it has recanted or a witness has made statements that are inconsistent, then a superior court judge should be made aware of that, because they don't get the 12 hours of tape. They get the four corners of an arrest warrant. And therein lies, I think, a real issue that we have to address.
I appreciate that, that expansion on that. One question that I don't think you answered when I asked this, so I want to ask again is, do you have any idea the differences in caseloads? Like you had mentioned, every case that comes
Yeah.
needs needs one of you guys, needs an attorney.
We handle 100%. They
Right.
handle approximately 63%.
So 63%. So 63% of all of the cases that come through are handled by a public defender.
Mhm.
And their budget is $30 million higher.
And
And
listen,
what
I'm not here to denigrate the public defenders.
No, I don't, not at all.
No?
No. It's just a matter of, are we allocating, like
Yes.
you said, it's our job to make sure that the asset, that the dollars are allocated correctly, and equitably across the board. Like if you're saying you're going back to, the police accountability bill, all this body cam footage, and you're down by, 30 heads to try to look at this, and your case is obviously 100%, the budget $30 million difference, 37% difference in all the cases that are being handled. I think this is a valid ask that really needs to be considered.
And I've asked Deputy Chief Rosado to take a look at those numbers. Would you just share sort of the origin of the numbers?
Sure. We took the numbers on the 63% versus the 100% that came from the judicial branch computer system, where we looked at the disposition, when the disposition takes place in the case, and to determine, who had an appearance in, whether it was a private attorney, whether they were pro se, or whether they had a public defender. So based on that data, that's how we got our 63%.
If you could send that information, I would appreciate that. I think it's that, and as you said, the differences in each GA, how many public defenders there are and how many attorneys and that. I think this is all very interesting information for us to look at to make sure we're balancing it. Thank you,
Sure.
Madam Chair.
Sure.
Thank you. I just want to go back to yours. You said that you handle 100% of the cases, but that's because you make the determination as to which direction it goes. So that's the reason why you handle 100%. I mean, that's not, that's part of what you guys have been doing all
We
along.
bear the burden of proof. The
Yes,
governor brings
you
the
have to make
charge.
the determine. So until that happens, the public defenders don't come into play.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, no matter what way we do it, it's going to stay that way. That's the way the system works, I think, correct? Yes.
Well,
I'll answer for you.
well,
Yes.
no, I'm not. That's the way the system works. But
Yes.
I'm asking for additional resources to make the system work better.
Okay. Yes, okay. I think that part of the reason why I'm a little concerned is that the presentation gives the impression that you feel that you have unfairly been handled as an agency financially when it comes to the financial program funding that's been coming down for years. And I've been here for 25 years, and most of the years, they're pretty much the same. These are things we're doing, this is what we need, and blah, blah. So a lot of this you set yourselves up for. This is what you request, and that's how it gets responded. And for example, that you said that the report, the prosecutorial data report,
Mhm.
when was that required of you by law? When did the bill go into effect?
July of 2020.
Okay, so July of 2020, and you are presenting it to us now and saying that you didn't have enough money to do this complete report. Is that what I'm understand? I'm sorry, I was.
No, no,
trying to-
we've
You finished it.
right. So I've been chief state's attorney now 3 years. So
Right.
the last budget cycle, I did ask for additional data, folks, on,
Okay.
on the, related to the accountability bill, the transparency bill.
Okay.
What I am saying is, Representative Walker, is that as the chief state's attorney, I'm saying that we're having difficulty, we will have difficult meeting our statutory obligations because we have been able to rely on the data entry folks paid for by emergency funding, which has run
Okay.
out.
Okay, so then, so these are expenses that you have calculated from the process that got you up to this point, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and in that time, did you not get a new data system?
The case management system, yes.
Yes, okay, so, and you're saying that, okay.
Yep.
I guess I'm missing something because it sounds like now we need more money to do what we paid for in setting it up.
No, what I'm saying is that the case management system is not a real-time data entry system.
Okay,
What I mean by that is if you go into any court in the state, prosecutors are in court speaking to people,
mm-hmm,
right? Cases are being called in court. After those cases are called into court, then the files go back into the state's attorney's office. And in order to comply with the case, the Public Act, we have to enter the data manually now into the
Okay.
case management system.
okay.
What I'm saying is we've relied in our ability to comply with the act
Mm-hmm.
on data entry folks that we no longer have.
Okay. Okay, I guess, in the times now, having that type of manpower needed in order to maintain a system, probably maybe we should have looked at a different system in order to do the process though. And so hopefully we'll have some consulting to help in looking at the next data system that we're going to have to purchase because we cannot continually rely on part-time people to do your data collection. So that should be first part of it before we even move forward with any of that. So I would recommend that we will ask you to come back and tell us who's going to help you set up your new data system before we give you 1.1 million or 1.8 million or whatever the, I just heard two numbers and I don't know which one it was.
Yeah, no,
But
I understand.
okay, but because we don't keep doing the same thing over and over again. We have to figure out how to improve and modernize, and I think that's really important that we do that. And if you need the staff, that's fine.
Yeah.
But let's not go to a system that we know is way out of
Wha-
individual, we'll talk at the working.
Can I just respond very briefly to that?
Sure.
So the case management system, when I say it's not real-time data entry, right? A lot of the courthouses don't have Wi-Fi. So even assuming if you could have a prosecutor in court entering data real-time, they don't have the ability to do that without Wi-Fi. So it by definition, it's going to be a system that is done after the fact.
Okay.
Right. And so what I've come to share with you is our concerns in our ability to keep up and to for the first time, our prosecutorial numbers are very robust in our data set. It is in large measure, not completely, but in large measure due to the fact that we had these workers.
Okay. We want you to have a streamlined system because we want your data, just
I
like
agree.
everybody else, because we've got to make decisions that are data embedded. So I think planning the system and everything needs to be in a different lane, and then we can help you get what you need, and we can get what we need. So that's the most important. And I just
Thank you.
because we're Approps, and we're Approps. Therefore, are there any more questions? Yes. Representative Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. And I just wanted to follow up on some of the information that Representative Walker was discussing. And one of the things that I've been aware of since I've been on appropriations is some of the testimony I've heard from the people who have been doing your position in the past, and that is in some parts of the state, the prosecutors have screening systems so that cases that you don't want to bring forward are screened before they get to the court system. And I'm just wondering how we're doing with that and whether if that could be expanded and would that help? And that's my first question. I have one more follow-up question.
So thank you for the question. We do have screening, a mechanism in place in Hartford, Waterbury, New Haven, Bridgeport, Norwich, and New London. It's known as the Early Screening Intervention Program, or ESI, so it's in 6 courts. Their prosecutors look at low-level offenses prior to the docketing of the cases. The idea there is to sort of off-ramp those cases, representatives, so that folks don't go into court, but go into certain types of services. Each of those locations has a social worker that is familiar, is sourced locally from the area, and is familiar with the local services, whether it's psychiatric, medical, housing, various things. I must tell you that we did not include a request to expand this program because we can keep the program running in the 6 locations using our current grant money until 2027. And I wanted to express in no uncertain terms really the priority on our data entry and on the prosecutors, because now we're talking about a statutory obligation that I just feel very strongly I have to come here and tell you. And so this was not an easy thing. So the 2 years ago, I came and asked for an expansion of ESI into all 13 locations. We're not giving up on ESI. We're going to hold the line in the 6 locations and then hopefully be back.
Have you
Thank-
done a ratio analysis so that you can compare and contrast the types of cases with some type of an analysis that would show how much that reduces the amount of data that you have to,
Representative Johnson, I have to butt in because we're now over, and I have one other person who has one question
Yeah.
too. So I would ask that you, your follow-up question that you submit to them and we can get it in our working group, okay? Thank you. Representative Candelaria?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. The request that you're making for the additional 20 positions of approximately $1.2 million. Is that in addition to the adjustment that was made by the governor?
Yes.
Okay, that's just what I needed clarification on that. So that's in addition to
Yes,
that.
sir.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so if anybody still has any more questions, I can submit them to Madam Administrator and she can get them to me, we can get going. It is important that we try and stay as close to the time frame because we're going to be here a long time tonight. I hope all of you are going to be here with us so that we are not the only ones that enjoy this by ourselves. Thank you. Have a good day. Next, we have the public defenders.
Attorney Sullivan? The floor is yours, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Senator.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thank you so much. I am Deborah Delpret Sullivan. I'm counsel to the Chief Public Defenders and the Public Defender Services Commission. And I'm here and unfortunately, the acting chief public defender has a medical procedure this afternoon that was pre-scheduled. So he had asked me just at the end of last week to come in. So with your permission, I can move forward. With me today, I do have Steve Hunt, who is our financial officer. I have Renee Semino also, who is the director of juvenile delinquency and child protection, and Alex Wamsley, who is the director of our assigned counsel. So if there's other questions, they'd be able to answer those if we're not able to. So if you would like to start with questions, or I could just go over the areas that we currently have.
Sorry. So I have a couple questions, and one is lowering the eligibility to 200% of the federal poverty level. In talking with Senator Looney, he indicated that that would put an unacceptable pressure on a number of people. Do you have any idea how many people would be affected by lowering that, and what would be the impact on your agency?
I can say that, I don't know as far as how many numbers of people, of clients or potential clients would be affected. It's been something that has been very important to us since this was put into the implementer back in 2022. It was Senator Looney's initial bill, Senate Bill 144, which we supported, because we found back then that having it at 200%, we were not even able to be appointed in cases where people were receiving the minimum wage. And people were coming in with a minimum wage, and we could not be appointed because they were over the guidelines, and we had to deny them. So this was wonderful that this happened in 2022. We continue to move on. And even today at 250% right now, we are able to, with the increase in the minimum wage, we're able to accommodate those people and have representation for them. If we look at what the current federal poverty guidelines are at 200%, you cannot make more than $30,120. $30,120 for one person. You add so much on if they have a spouse or children. And our guidelines today at 250% are $37,650. And we are finally able to get those people for those charges where incarceration is likely. We can talk a little bit about numbers between the prosecutors and what we handle, but where prosecution is likely, that we're able to then have them do an application and be appointed. These are not people who are making a lot of money at all. So we have requested that money stay. We just, in order to have it go into effect on January 1st, we had to go and make sure that we were able to have people come in to handle the number of cases. And Steve can tell me exactly, there are a number of people that have been hired that were attorneys and support staff in order to make sure that we were ready to go on January 1st, which was the effective date. And we have hired those people. And now if this gets rolled back, it's going to impact on the GAs across the state, because that's where most, that's where the arraignments start off at. And in our testimony, we talked about either a hard freeze on wages going forward, or hiring, going forward, or laying people off that we just hired in order to accommodate this. We can try to work and see if we can get numbers of people, to answer your question more specifically, of people that it would impact out there in the community. But this is something just to be able to help those with a minimum wage. This is what this does.
Thank you for that. And we have talked about assigned counsel over and over again.
Yes.
Where do we stand on assigned counsel now?
For assigned counsel, currently they are being paid. There's a rate that was put into effect a few years ago, and currently their hourly rate is $88, with, I believe it's the flat rate, and $120 an hour for the trial rate. If they go to trial, they're able to bill for that. They're able to, there's some exceptions where they're able to bill for hours before they actually get to the trial itself. But it's a very low rate. And in our testimony, we talk about other states, and in our past testimony to the subcommittees, we've also talked about what the current rates are for other states. And even looking at the Connecticut federal rate for the federal public defenders, when they have contract attorneys there, which is mostly everything they do, it's $175 an hour. So we've got people here in this state that are great defense lawyers that they'd rather do that work at the federal level for $175 an hour than the work that we have at the state level. And they're very qualified people. And so we've lost people because of that.
And tell me, what would it take to bring them up to the federal level? Do you know?
Do you have any idea?
No, but we can get that.
Who
for
are
you. We
Yeah,
can
I
get
think
that.
is a number we'd have to
You
work
have
on.
to- Wait, you have to come back up to the mic and identify
minute.
yourself, please. CT, and I'll turn this off.
Okay. Alex Walmsley, Director of Assigned Counsel.
Thanks.
We do not have that number, but I can get it for you because we have all the case assignment numbers.
Thank you. If you could bring that to the working group, that would be helpful.
So I'm Steve Hunt, Financial Director for the Public Defenders. I do want to note that we did submit a budget request to OPM to increase the rates on a 3-year plan. It was $3.3 million next fiscal year, an additional 3.3 on top of that in the following fiscal year, and then FY28 an additional for a total of about $10.2 million total request to get the rates where we feel like they should be. And that
Thank
was
you.
not included in the governor's budget.
Thank you for that. I think that that's important for us to know because I know that we have been looking at trying to increase the rates to at least give you some ability to have people there for the number of cases. And where do you stand relative to staffing? Anybody know?
I can give you some context. We've hired, as Deborah said previously, about 21 positions associated with the increase in the eligibility thresholds. That was effective on January 1st. Our position count was never adjusted to accommodate these increased positions. So technically, we are over our authorized position count by about 12 because of that. I did get clarification from OPM before we went forward with that hiring about going over the authorized count, and they said because the authorized count is not in statute anywhere, we need to go above it in order to comply with the the legislative intent of the budget to increase the eligibility threshold.
Oh, didn't know that.
Hmm.
Jeez. I could try that in a number of areas.
Yeah.
So anyways, thank you for that. Representative Nuccio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I want to expound on that. You have 451 headcount listed in the budget pages. Are you saying you're actually at 463?
Right now, we're at 463 filled.
And
With an
so
authorized-
you have no opens then at this point. You have 100% expended
Yes, that's correct.
plus over by 12.
That's correct.
Well, that's good to know. So I guess I want to, going from the meeting that I just had, well, actually, before I do that, the assigned counsel rate, I know, as you had said, we talked about increasing those rates. I think we increased them in the last budget. But I notice here that we're taking 805,516 from that to go to PS. That might have something to do with the 12 overage of heads. I don't know. And then we're taking another million out for current requirements. So we are taking 1.8 million out of what we put in the last budget. Is that
Yep, that's
correct?
correct.
And can you expound on
That's
that?
correct. So there's a couple parts of that. One is there's a reallocation of about 805,000 from the assigned counsel account to personal services in order to fund 13 translation positions that were requested as part of the budget request. In addition to that, there was a cut of $1 million in the assigned counsel account in order to reflect, current expenditure levels. We are running about $1 million surplus in the account. I think that surplus was now taken twice in terms of it was reallocated and now it's being cut. So one or the other needs to occur, or else we're not going to have sufficient funds in order to, pay the assigned counsel next fiscal year.
So the 13 translation headcount that was added in the last budget, that's in the 451.
No,
or-
that's, so the 13 positions would be effective July 1st if they're included in the final budget. We weren't given the position count in the governor's budget for those 13. I'm not sure why, but
So you're going to add another 13 heads on
If-
top of the 12 that aren't in there.
that is correct.
And that's as of July 1st, 2026.
Yes, I would request that the position count adjustment would be made in the appropriations committee process in order to get our authorized count to where it needs to be in order to accommodate the people that we have hired.
So we need to bump your headcount by 25 heads, not by 12.
By 13, and then
The
it
12.
depends on what happens with the eligibility. Because we were given funding for about 40 positions to increase the eligibility thresholds. We've hired about 21 of those positions. And it would be an addition of 40 plus another 13 for the translation positions.
I'm sorry, we're going around in numbers here. You were given 40,
Yes,
right?
we were
To
given,
accommodate going to the 250%. You've hired 21 of those 40,
that's correct.
meaning you have 19 left open that you have not filled.
Yep.
None of these are included in the headcount numbers that are here. So this is as of 2026, July 1st. right?
That's correct.
Then you have 13 translators down below. That was, again, something that was legislative to provide the translators. And
Well, the translation was just a recommendation by the governor in his latest proposal. It hasn't taken effect yet.
oh, so this is part of the,
It's new.
this
It's
is
new.
new.
It's
This
part
is
of the
new.
governor's proposal.
Yes.
Okay, so that's not in there. So you still have we have to add 40 heads to your 250. I mean, 451, we would have to add 40 heads because you got the funding for 40. You
That's
just didn't get the head count.
That's correct. If the eligibility threshold funding is restored from the governor's proposal. Because
Okay,
it's being completely eliminated in his budget.
this is a hot mess. All right,
Yes.
okay. And the $1 million out of the assigned council is to reflect your current expenditures. So with the money that was there, you're not using $1 million of it. So that $1 million is lapsing.
That's correct, but that $1 million projected surplus for this fiscal year is being taken twice by
'Cause the 8
reallocating it.
5 and then the $1 million.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, yep, got that part, accounted, got that part. Okay, the next question that I have is kind of a little more philosophical. If I take the assigned council and I take the personnel services, I'm at about 86 million dollars is what we're paying for the public defender's office. And the Department of Criminal Justice was here just before us. Do you have any indication as to why it costs so much more for the public
Absolutely.
defenders than?
I believe criminal justice only handles criminal cases. We actually, in 2011, the legislature placed the Commission on Child Protection within our agency. And if you look at the first page of our testimony, it talks about the types of representation that we provide besides defense of indigent accused and adults and children and other things for post-conviction. We also represent children, indigent adults, child welfare cases, indigent contemporaries and respondents, paternity matters, family magistrate court, and GALs and attorneys for children and family court, where the family qualifies for the state rates. So we have a whole specialized unit since 2011 that is now funded. And so there's a great cost to that. We have a whole staff that deals with this and then outside attorneys that are appointed to represent individuals. So the state's attorney's office is not involved in that whatsoever. And also, I just want to just note for everyone that while the state's attorney's office may handle 100% of all the criminal cases that come in, including infractions and low-level misdemeanors, we do not. We are not under the statutes able to be appointed in infraction cases. And also, unless the prosecutors are seeking incarceration, somebody could not apply for our representation. So there is a difference there as to that. And that's why I believe the distinction exists.
And do you know what percentage of your cases are the criminal in nature, as you said?
As far as the percentage?
Yeah.
We always thought that around in the GA courts, we were probably higher than 60%, that probably higher than 80%, but we could do a little bit of we have Justware, which is our case management system, which when we went from paper to electronic, these are things that we put in, the attorneys put these into their, into Justware about their cases. And so we could probably do some type of a query and get that information for you.
I would appreciate that. Thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
Yes.
Representative Gilchrist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you. And I just want to thank your department for being such an active participant on the Trafficking in Persons Council.
Absolutely.
As a follow-up to Senator Austin's question earlier, it does seem some work must have gone in to be able to determine how many staff you'd need for that expansion from the 200 to the 250%. And so maybe because recognizing that it just started the program in
Yes.
January, could we see the number that you projected would get served by expanding from 200 to 250 in order to determine you'd need that many positions?
I think we can do that. And one of the things I wanted to mention is that when this legislation went through, what we did was we met with the Public Defender Services Commission at a meeting and actually indicated that this was going to happen as of January 1, but within their statutory power, they were able to raise, their own, percentage. And they did. They went to 225% back in April of 2024. So it would be a gradual increase and not something that would increase so, greatly. So I think that going back, we may be able to get you some numbers on that.
Wonderful. My other question has to do with the section in your testimony about the social workers.
Yes.
Could you talk us through the recommendation that came out of the Office of the Child Advocate, where it said that assigned counsel failed to meet child welfare visits and record request standards required. What does that look like?
I'm going to have Renee Semino come up and talk about that.
Thank you. Renee Spino, I am the Director of Delinquency Prevention and Child Protection. It's nice to see you again. It's nice to see everyone here. So when I first started in December of 2023, I got a phone call from the Child Advocate indicating to me that they wanted to discuss the report regarding Liam R., the investigation and findings, and other critical incident reports. Their report found that assigned counsel and GALs were not meeting the statutory and the constitutional requirements for seeing the children in the amount of time that they needed to. So I brought that information back to my agency. I was really proud of the approach we took. We wanted to get ahead of it. We did our own internal investigation for our assigned counsel to figure out what was going on. And we found that our assigned counsel for child protection matters decreased by 60% over about a 6-year period. So we went from 275 assigned counsel up to our lowest was 87. So we knew that they needed support. We knew that they were hardworking people that just were spread too thin. Also, in our juvenile offices, I was a public defender in New Haven Juvenile Court. I got children and I got delinquency cases. If I got a child on a child protection case, I had a social worker, investigator, I had a secretary. We had holistic representation. We realized that assigned counsel, who are usually solo practitioners, did not have that same support. So this plan we came up with the Child Advocate supporting it. They also submitted testimony. I'm not sure if you saw that, supporting our requests for the social workers. We'll give the assigned counsel a second set of eyes. They'll be able to do half the visits. They'll be able to get narratives and records. Another thing that the Child Advocate found was that assigned counsel was not getting the narratives. So social workers would be able to do that. We looked at whether or not we can make it an expense and hire them individually. And as an agency, we took the approach that there wouldn't be consistency with the social workers. We wouldn't also train them. We thought assigning a social worker to a certain area, having that same social worker be with a child from, could be birth, until we know it's post-18 work that we're also doing with these kids.
Thank you. So the social worker would work with a number of assigned counsel then?
Yes.
Okay. And these assigned counsel, the same assigned counsel we're talking about that make just $102 an hour?
Yes.
And so,
88.
oh, we didn't go up to the 102 yet. I thought
I think 102 is just for appeals and termination of parental rights.
so we're asking, so someone agrees to be an assigned counsel. And then they'd be paid $88 to go out and do the child welfare piece per hour?
Yes.
Okay.
And they're spread very thin.
Well, yes.
And they don't have somebody in the office, making the record requests, talking with DCF workers, talking with the family, talking with the child to find out what services the child needs. So they were definitely spread too thin, and we know it's our responsibility to try to support them as best we can.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that proposal.
Oh, thank you for the last three. Thank you so much for your testimony. Just a quick question regarding the referrals that you make once you make a determination, and if you have more staff to be able to make determinations. Are you finding it difficult to find regular caseworkers in the region to try and help with behavioral health services for the children?
In child protection cases or in delinquency cases or overall?
Overall.
So I have seen when I was in New Haven Juvenile Court that we were struggling with getting service providers. CSSD does a really amazing job in juvenile court and providing services, but many like the MST, there's wait lists. There's also shout out to CTVIP in New Haven, which is a great organization helping out children. But there seems to be a decrease across the line in all social service agencies for children.
And just quickly, what would you say about Eastern Connecticut?
I don't have experience with Eastern Connecticut. I can try to do some research and get back to you with that. I can speak to the people that do work in that area, and I'd be happy to provide that to the working group.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, you're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Up next is Commissioner Quiros. Good afternoon. Just so you know, we're sitting in the dark because apparently the system doesn't work unless we sit in the dark. I don't understand it. Trying to figure it out, that there's something to do with the this mechanism back here. I don't get it.
It's not really, that's because we've had a long day and a long night in our eyes. but okay.
It is because of that, because I need bright lights to see. So, Commissioner, how are you? Good
Great.
afternoon.
Doing?
Um, you have, can we just start off with some basic, counts? You have what is your, head count? What is your personnel count?
So right now, as of today, we got 5,966 total head count. Out of that 5,966, 3,327 are correction officers. Another 749 are inmate medical service staff. Out of 749, 679 are full-time staff, 9 part-time, and 61 per diem. For the correction officer vacancy, I have 522. And for inmate medical service, I have 63, 54 full-time, and 9 are per diem.
522.
522 COs, position vacancy, 63 medical service, 9 medical service per diem. So I'm going to focus, even though I come from the custody side of things, I want to focus on the medical side of things. So the Sentencing Commission has done a lot of work relative to the number of people that you have within the confines of your agency that are chronically mentally ill. And fully 28% of male inmates, although I think that number is low because it's a really self-reported count, and 80% of female inmates are chronically mentally ill, disregarding the substance use disorder component of things. How many medical staff or that combined is medical and mental health, right? The 749 is
Correct, the
combined.
749 is combined.
So about 5 years ago, how much have you gone up in medical staff over the last few years?
So in 2018, when we took over the merger from UConn, we ended up with 625 staff members. And as of today, we have 749. So quick math is about 124.
So you've increased the number of staff that you have had up to 124 within the confines of medical and mental health.
Correct.
And that is parsed out throughout the whole agency.
The 13 correctional facility, yes.
And you have relative to the 13 agencies, has the inmate population grown in the last few years?
Yes, when I closed the first facility, I'm going to say in 2021 at Northern, the population has increased over 2,000. This morning, we were at 11,098.
So while the medical and mental health staff have increased, you have also increased with the people under your care.
Correct, about 2,000
And
more.
thank you. And so you had done a report probably about 4 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer, a little bit less, but around 4 years, which estimated the number of people that medical staff per facility and mental health staff per facility that you needed. Can you, for the working group, upgrade that to today's numbers?
Will do, absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I'd like to understand, I have a lot of people that say we have to do a better job on X, Y, and Z. We need more medical staff. We need more mental health staff. And by the way, we should make sure that the Department of Public Health oversees all of the work that the Department of Corrections has relative to medical and mental health. I'm not interested in the Department of Public Health overseeing anything because they've been overseeing nursing homes for years and we still can't get that right. So, that's snarky. I know, don't respond. But I do think that people have to understand that if we're not giving you the resources that you need, it's hard to hold an agency accountable when we know those resources are not being met. And, you know, when I was working in the department, we were 21 or so facilities and probably over 20,000 people, give or take. And I've been there throughout the times when UConn was not overseeing it, the Department of Corrections was overseeing it, then UConn was overseeing it, then we were doing local facilities, and then we went back to UConn. So I've seen a number of iterations of this, and every few years, someone says they have a better idea, but it's only regurgitating the information that we had before. So I want to make sure that we're providing you with the resources that you need relative to your staffing. You have 679 vacancies. Is that related to retirements?
The good portion of the, like in 2024, there was 405 termination. Termination is not that you're firing individuals. Termination is that people either retire, people separated from state services for a different job, or people just left the agency. So in 2024, we had 405 individuals that left the agency.
So that is 2/3 of the 679 is related to that 2024
Correct.
termination number. And for the safety of both the people who are incarcerated and your staff, we have instituted a number of policies that I think are important. And one of them has been communication with their families outside. And in this budget is elimination of electronic messaging. Have you found the systems that we have put in relative to communication with families to have an impact on the atmosphere within the confines of your agency?
Absolutely. A positive. This is a conversation, difficult conversation that I had with OPM Secretary Beckham. And my request to Secretary Beckham was to focus on our inmate medical services in order to enhance the delivery of service that we deliver to the population. So it's a difficult decision. I wish I could keep both, but I understand that my focus as a commissioner, if I'm gonna get additional funding, I wanted to go towards the inmate medical services. But it does have a positive feedback on the individuals being able to communicate directly with their loved ones. And I will tell you that the electronic messaging version is used 100% more than the telephone calls.
Because everybody uses messaging more than they use phone calls now.
Correct.
I always tell my family, give me a call. No, grandma, we want to just text you. Okay. I don't understand it, but apparently that's what the new generation does. I don't know what my great grandchild's going to do because I don't think they'll be using a phone for a couple of years, but maybe they'll start out very young. I also wanted to talk a little bit about something that we have talked a bit about in the Department of Corrections, and we've had a number of advocates come up and talk about strip searching, different than a cavity search, but strip searching that happens on a regular basis with contact visiting, someone going to court or having to go someplace else. And we had talked about perhaps looking at body scan machines. So what is your position on body scans? Do you think that they would do the same job, do a lesser job, or a better job for viewing somebody for a possible contraband or other things?
So let me be very clear. I am for body scanners, not just for the population, but also for the staff entering the facilities in the front entrance. We submitted a report about 2 years ago, and we identified 27 locations where body scanners will be deployed in the admitting and process where they come in and visiting. And that was 27. It was about $5.5 million like 2 years ago. So it definitely would enhance safety security. It will definitely do a better job. The machines and the staff member will do. It'll bring back some humanity. It'll be humane. Those I when you do strip searches, that type of job is you do it because you have to, so you understand the reason for safety and security. But it's not a job that people desire to do. So those body scanners will be do a better job on the searches. And again, there was a bill last year on body scanners in the lobby areas, and I am for that too, 100%, to include my staff going through it.
So essentially, relative to body scans, we would need in today's dollars, maybe $6.5 million, and that would outfit lobbies. That wouldn't, what would we need to do the
Yeah.
lobbies too?
The 27 that we needed was going to be for our AP areas and our visiting areas across the 13 correctional facilities. You would need additional 13 more body scanners for the 13 correctional facilities.
That would be 40.
Actually, McDougal is 2 buildings, so that's 2 separate visiting rooms. So probably around 40, 42 body scanners, but I can give you a proper count.
If you could bring that
Yeah.
count to us at the working group, that would be helpful. Could you also include what it would be, what we would need necessarily if someone is being put in restrictive housing or segregation after a fight, if that person was being strip searched, if we took that away, what would we need for body scanners relative to that?
That'll be an extra 10 more machines. So you're talking about 50 to 52.
Okay, and the dollar amount on what a body scanner is, give or take?
And 2 years ago for 27 was $5.5 million. With 52, you're talking about probably $11 to $12 million.
Well, 11 to 12 million dollars, and what that does is a number of things. It provides a more secure and safe environment for the people working there and the people living there.
Correct.
It provides a sense of humanity relative to how the both the people working there and the people living there are going through.
Correct, yes.
Okay. I think it's essentially chump change relative to the benefits of it. And I'm wondering on electronic messaging if we have any way to codify the results of the atmospheric changes that are there. And I don't know if you'd be able to codify that in dollars and cents, what changes may happen. I mean, somebody able to talk to a family member might ease their tension on a certain day, give or take. So I'd like to understand that, and if you have any way of saying this stops 10 incidents a day from happening, or 2, I'd like to understand that a little bit more. And if you have any, if you can't codify it, I know it's kind of you know, up in the air kind of calculations, but I'd like to understand that. And an updating on that spreadsheet, that it was one of my favorite spreadsheets, quite frankly, because it showed in great detail what we needed to have for medical and mental health staff. And if we're going to continue to use you as a quasi psychiatric facility, we got to give you the staff to deal with the people who become incarcerated there. And we don't have any place else for them. And so we've decided that a prison is the best way if someone has a chronic mental illness. So so thank you for that information. I appreciate it. And I really want to thank you and your agency for the work it does. It was a great career for 21 years for me, and I have a lot of respect for the people that work there in any of the classifications that you have. So I want to thank you for that. Representative Walker.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. How are you? Good to see you again. Senator Austin was asking about the number of correctional officers and staff you had. I wanted to know, let's say going back to maybe 2010, what was the number approximately? Do you have an idea of how many inmates we had in about 2010? Good. Oh, you just happen to have that. Thank you so much. I guess you guys have done this before. You want to turn it on? You have to press the button. There you go.
look it up first.
Yeah. Oh, no, the commissioner was trying to help you with the mic.
In 2010, our average inmate population was 18,490.
Wow. Okay.
And as he said today, it's currently at about 11,100.
Yeah. So 11,000, that's a sizable drop. And if we talk about the number of correctional officers that you have now in 2010, how many correctional officers did you have then?
3,971.
3,971. And now we're 3,327?
Correct.
Okay. Do you feel that because the population is dropping, can you explain why the number of correctional officers needed hasn't sort of kept pace with the number of number of inmates that have left the system?
Since 2010, there's been 8 facility closures in the Department of Correction. The count has dropped. In 2010, there was 3,900. In 2025, there's 3,300. And every time, I'm going to speak about the 3 facility closures that I closed, Northern, Rogowski, and the Willer Building. When I started closing Northern, I had close to 500 vacant CO position. We were getting ready for the retirement in July 1st, 2022. So the closure of those facilities, when we closed those facilities, the staff went into a vacancy positions. And even today, I got 522 vacant correctional positions. So for the last probably 15 years, since I've been a district commissioner, deputy commissioner, our vacancy rate for correctional officers has always been in the 4 or 5. I've been seeing 600 vacancy rates. So that's why you don't really see a decline with the facility closures. As far as the facility closures, when you look at it, besides Northern, that was the only maximum facility that we closed. Our maximum facility is where it's staffed the heaviest. When Northern closed, there was about 125 people that were redeployed because there was only 81 offenders at the time. And we had started redeploying staff out of Northern when the count dropped. Willis-Cybulski, when we closed Willis-Cybulski, about 110 staff members. Your maximum facilities are still intact. The maximum facilities that were intact in 2010 are still the same facilities in 2025. And those are the facilities that are staffed the heaviest, where the biggest budget expense come in those facilities.
So you're still staffing all those facilities even though you have no inmates there?
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, okay.
I didn't say that. The facilities that are closed, those facilities are closed. There's no staff in there.
Okay, there's no staff.
There's no staff there. What I'm saying is that the facilities that we would close with a medium facility and minimum level of security facility, those facilities are staffed with less staff.
Okay.
The level 4 facilities in 2010 and 25 are still the same, and those are where are heavily staffed, no more staff.
Okay, then of the 11,000, no, of the 3,300 COs you have now, how many are on medical leave?
On medical leave, I'll have to get that to you. I can tell you how many are on workers' comp.
Okay, workers' comp.
185.
185.
Correct.
Okay, they're on. Okay, now workers' comp is once you've gone through the process, but you could be on medical leave for quite some time, couldn't you?
Yeah, you can be on FMLA, state, or federal.
Mhm.
You can take a leave of absence. I'm starting to see individuals taking unpaid leave of absence, and even though we're not paying them, but we're still paying to backfill their positions.
Yeah, I know, because how much did you spend in overtime this past year?
This past year, we spent $53 million in overtime.
And that because of staffing.
Correct. I can give you the top 10 reasons if you're interested.
Top 10 reasons. That was a game show, so it wasn't it? Just give me the top two.
So top 2 is position vacancy
Mhm.
and workers' comp.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, those are
Okay.
top 2.
So I guess when we come back to meet as a group, I want to itemize up what it really costs to run your facilities, because there are a lot of underlying costs that are in here that don't come to us in the budget. And then my final one I'll ask, because I know there are people that want to ask. In the inmate medical, how much are you paying for fringe?
The medical French.
And that's not that's not included in the amount.
Yeah, it's not included in our budget.
Yeah, I know.
It runs almost equal to the pay.
So if you're spending 150, then you're,
If you're, yeah, so roughly if you're $50,000 salary, we pay slightly under $50,000 in fringes, while the state pays.
so what I'm trying to say is in the budget, it has 150 million. So we're saying that it's really 300 in cost.
Plus or minus, yes.
So yeah, I would like to get an itemized list of the costs that we've talked about now, the fringe, the Medicaid, the workers' comp, people on leave. There was one other one that I had, I forgot. I can come back after I find it. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I want to go back to the communications issue. Was that in your initial request? I know you talked about a conversation with OPM, but was that in your initial request?
No.
Okay. But given the choice you have, you support that?
Unfortunately, yes, Senator, it's a tough decision. Like I said, there's a lot of benefit to the electronic messaging. It's being used 100% more than the phones. So they're connecting directly with the family members, with the loved ones. It definitely improves the conditions in the climate in the facilities. But when I met with OPM, my main request for additional funding was for the inmate services. And, so unfortunately, when I have to choose as a commissioner which area I want to go, I think that the inmate services area is the area that we're going to get the most impact, though. And if there's somehow I can have both, it'd be beneficial to the agency.
Yeah, and I guess it's always interesting to me that folks have to choose, right? You put in a budget request and they put in what they wanted to have happen. So I don't understand that you have to choose that. Are you aware that there's studies about communication and not only the impact on the prison itself, but recidivism?
Correct.
And
Yes,
I would assume then you know that it reduces recidivism?
Correct.
So this is not, as it was characterized yesterday, a nice thing to have. It is a pertinent thing to have for public safety. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And yet we are choosing to eliminate it and run the risk of having a worse condition on public safety and characterize that as a nice thing to have.
Yeah. No, I understand your concern. Those are my same concerns. And as a commissioner, sometimes I got to make some tough decisions of where the additional funding is going to go to. And in this case, I felt that the inmate services were better. But knowing exactly what you just outlined, that the impact.
So I just want, and I don't usually cut you off because you and I go back and forth, but I want to be clear what I'm hearing. So are you telling me that you actively got to make a decision here?
I don't think the decision is my decision. The decision is not my decision. I'm not the individual that's in charge of putting together the governor's budget. I do voice the concerns that I may have in areas where I may need additional support. And we have additional conversations. I had additional conversation with OPM. And then at the end of the day, the budget that's drafted for the Department of Correction, I got to make it work.
And I understand it. I would just suggest that you don't take credit for things that aren't yours. In terms of the additional folks to implement that that work that was done with the communications, what happens now with them under this budget? Do you keep those 10 folks or do
No,
you
they'll go
not?
back. They'll go back into the line. They go back into
But
into
you still
vacancy.
have them.
I will still have them, but they will go back into a vacancy, a correction officer vacancy. Correct.
So did we just allow you? How did we make this happen? Did we actually give you money for those folks, or did we allow you to use other? I don't know I don't remember what we did.
There
in
was an
order-
allotment in the last budget. We requested, I believe, was 15, and we got, I believe, 10.
with the associated monies, right? It wasn't like
Correct.
you used positions you already had to do it, right?
With the money came with the funding.
And they're going back into the line. You have some vacancies, but we're not eliminating funding and using money that's allocated, that could be allocated for that, right?
Correct.
Uh-huh. Okay. I might come back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative Johnson? Representative Johnson or Representative Gilchrist?
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation. And I just wanted to ask you, looking at the Department of Corrections budget, when you look at the Community Support Services section, and some of the testimony you provided earlier, that there was a reduction in the numbers of people who are in prison. And I'm wondering if there's a corresponding increase in people who have been placed in halfway houses in the community.
I'm struggling hearing you. I heard some of the
Okay,
questions.
so I'm wondering if you have data on how you had a reduction in the prison population. They get discharged into halfway houses, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, is there a corresponding increase in the numbers of people going into halfway houses versus staying incarcerated in the prison?
I will have to get that information to you.
Okay, and then to follow up on that, when you have those people going into the halfway houses, what are the conditions? Do you have contracts with them? The halfway houses, how do you do that? Tell us how you put somebody in a halfway house.
I'm gonna have the deputy director come up and speak about that, if I may.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Kendra
Thank you.
Herrick, Deputy Director for Pearl and Community Services.
Thank you so much.
So you were inquiring about how somebody matriculates into a halfway house?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, so generally speaking, if somebody is eligible and meets criteria to be released on one of the release mechanisms to the community on supervision, if they're lacking a sponsor or suitable residents in the community, they will be automatically matriculated and placed on a list for halfway house placement.
Okay, and what kind of contracts do you have with the halfway houses?
We have a number of providers, contracted providers in the community who provide those halfway house services.
Are they public?
Are they public? They're nonprofit contracted
Okay, so
providers.
they're private. They're
Are,
private,
are they
nonprofit.
public contracts or public?
Well, they're,
providers?
okay, so who are you contracting? The state or are you contracting with the
These
federal
are, these are
government?
with nonprofit organizations.
So then they're private. They're private nonprofits. Okay, so you have private nonprofit contracts. So in that circumstance, are they all the same?
We have our halfway house, our work release programs. We have a specific mental health halfway house program, a residential sex offender treatment program, our women's halfway house programs.
Okay, thank you. And how do you oversee them?
parole officers. We have a residential services unit who has the supervisors, and then our parole officers who are assigned to those units.
Okay. And how often do you take a look at what they're doing?
Our parole officers are in there on a weekly basis.
Okay. And in terms of the feedback, do they talk to you or do they talk to other providers of mental health services, for example?
I would say it's a combination of all. There's a strong collaboration and collaborative effort between the Parole and Community Services Division as well as the providers.
Okay. And do you have data that coordinates with this information? And I've seen some of your contracts, so I do want to take a look and see if they're all similar. Are they, the contractors, the nonprofit contractors, are they all located in the state of Connecticut?
Yes. Yes.
So the one contractor that that was from Texas is no longer a contractor here? With the Nurse Grayson murder?
I'm sorry?
Nurse Grayson murder was in a halfway house in
Yeah,
Willimantic?
that was not, let me interject on that. That individual was not under the supervision of Department of Correction, was not on parole. That individual was under the supervision of probation, CSSD.
And do you cover probation as well?
No.
No.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next,
Representative Gilchrist.
Representative Gilchrist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, Commissioner. Good to see you.
Good afternoon.
With regards to when you said the reasons for overtime, were the top two open positions and workman compensation? Is that what you
Yes.
said?
So number one is position vacancies. Number two is workers' comp. Number three is sick family. Number four is sick. Number five is outside hospital duty. Number six is vacation. Number seven is medical trips. Number eight is administrative leave. Number nine is military. And number 10 is workers' comp medical appointments.
Thank you. In your experience, why are there so many vacant positions that impact the need for overtime?
It is, hold on. No, I got it. As I indicated before, it's not uncommon for the Department of Correction to have anywhere from 300 to 400 to 500 vacancy position. On a quarterly basis, I've submitted to OPM that I needed start an academy class with 100 correctional officers. OPM is aware that I'm looking to have in 2024 300 correctional officers to go through the academy, and in 2025 300, in 2026 another 300 correctional officers to help us with the July 1st 2026 when the CBAC goes back into negotiations. And we've never, in the history that I've been in correction for 35 years, we've never been at 100%. There's always been anywhere from 300 to 600 vacancy correctional positions.
Okay, so then tying that to the proposal to reduce the overtime spending reduction plan is part of that, this academy, or I guess my, it's not a fear, but I mean, if we're looking at the numbers for overtime just over the last 10 years and then in more recent years, how do you anticipate that amount of savings in such a short amount of time?
And with the additional 300 correctional officers that we're going to be requesting from OPM, we've also established an overtime committee in areas, and we know the areas that we're going to target and to reduce the overtime, and closely monitoring the situation. And I think it's 2.8 million to 2026 and another 2.8 million 2027 that I feel is doable.
Okay. I apologize if I missed a report that came out. There's a lot of reports in this building. But could you is there an actual overtime spending reduction plan that's been created by your department that could be brought to the work group? Or is that an internal?
That's what the committee we set up the committee probably 3 weeks ago, and I'll share that with you what we have so far. Absolutely.
Okay, that'd be great. Then just a follow up to the electronic messaging. I don't know what that looks like. So can you paint the picture for an inmate? How do they access it? What does it look like on a daily basis to use the electronic messaging?
Similar to a text message on the phone. Similar to text messages on the phone, they utilize the tablets. There is a delay to the messaging. We got about 500 keywords that if the message is not hitting any of the keywords, it'll go straight through to the individuals. Keywords can be riot, can be disturbance, can be a planned assault, or something like that. Those are the next morning are reviewed by the phone monitoring officers, and then they're released. The individual gets about 10 stamps a day. So an individual that's incarcerated receive 10 stamps a day, so they can send about 10 messages a day. The family members get 75 stamps, so they can correspond back to them. Again, I had the numbers here. It's used 100 times more than the telephone calls being
When
made.
you're saying 10 messages, I'm just still trying to paint the picture for myself. Is that 10 different people you can text or 10 messages in total?
10 messages in total per day. So if the individual decides that he or she is going to message their mother, the father, the spouse, and each message has, for the individual that's incarcerated, has 6,500 characters. So it's almost a letter that they could write to the individual.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do they get the 10 a day? Everyone gets 10? a
Everyone
day?
gets 10 is on tablets. Each individuals have tablets assigned to them.
Do they have to sign out the tablet? How do they?
It stays in their possession.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we'd be taking all that away.
No, the tablet remains because the tablet is utilized too to make phone calls. So we're not depending on the equipment, the phones that are mounted to the wall. So these individuals, while they're in the cell and can make a telephone call, we shut them down probably at I think it's either 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, and then turn them back on at 7 in the morning.
But if this proposal went through to eliminate the funding for electronic messaging, they'd still have the tablet,
Still have the tablets,
but they'd no longer be able to send these
just
messages to
electronic
family.
message, correct.
And they don't have to pay currently.
They don't pay for the phone calls or the electronic messages.
Okay. I thank you for your comments earlier and just, when I get had to make tough choices. I also recognize what you've explained. And to me, when the priority is healthcare, right? This seems to be a part of someone's mental health care, to be able to connect with their family. So thank you for painting that picture for me.
Thank you. Before everybody starts going to questions, I just want to recognize that we have the chairperson of the BOPP on here, and am I looking at this? She gets in at the same hour that DOC is on, so and I just want to make sure that she has time to at least talk. I know we have two other people that want to talk, Representative Gonzalez and Representative Nuccio, but if we would mind getting BOPP to speak a little bit about, and I am not going to try to say your last name. Maybe Zach Nene.
Good afternoon, Zaccanini.
Zaccanini,
you.
I almost got it. So if you want to just give us a little bit of an overview, and then thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, and I apologize for not being there in person. I had a pardons hearing earlier that was scheduled a month in advance, so I didn't want to cancel that. And my executive director, Joe Garibaldi, is there in person. Thank you. So we did submit testimony yesterday. Not sure if you've had a chance to review or if you'd like me to read it.
No, we don't need you to read it. Just sort of give us an overview of what you're doing, and your person can come up to the other desk right there in case there are any questions.
Okay, thank you. So in fiscal year 23-24, we reviewed a total of 2,845 cases for parole consideration, 1,986 applications for pardon consideration, and 92 applications for commutation of sentence. Panels of the board conducted 2,093 hearings for the purpose of granting, rescinding, or revoking parole, 1,267 reviews resulting in the granting or denying of various types of pardons, and we held 61 hearings resulting in the granting or denial of a commutation of sentence. We have overall 69 full-time and part-time positions. Our head count is 61 actively. We have 5 part-time board member positions available open and 3 full-time office assistant positions open. And they're due to the part-time board member positions are statutorily set, and retirements. The other 3 vacant positions are retirements.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for that. I appreciate that, Madam Chairperson. And thank you both for being here. Are there any questions directly for BOPP for the Board of Pardons and Paroles? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. I just wanted to know, when we have people that are on parole, does that go directly to you to determine whether or not they should go on probation?
No, probation is part of a judicial sentence.
Well, someone's been sentenced to prison, then they go on parole, and then perhaps to probation?
Correct. So probation would begin at the end of their discretionary parole, so at the end of their sentence.
Yes, and so is there a chance for you to say, give them a little bit less time on parole and a little more time on probation?
There is, yes, we have the ability to terminate their parole early, and then they would start their probation earlier than the end of their sentence.
And how do you make those determinations?
We do receive reports from Parole and Community Services of the Department of Correction about the status of an individual on parole. We look at things such as their stability in the community, including employment, housing, any misconducts or violations that they've had on parole, of course, their criminal history, level of violence, things like that.
Okay, and I thank you for those remarks, and
Good.
I will add additional questions when we go into our working group. Thank you so much.
So Representative Johnson and Madam Chairperson, your terminating parole a little bit earlier does not increase the amount for probation. That is done, that is not within the purview of your oversight, correct? It may start earlier.
Correct. They would start earlier. Correct.
But it does not have anything to do with the time frame that a probation is. That is set generally in the sentencing of the individual when they were first incarcerated. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator Austin.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we're clear on this because this has been something people have been talking about. They often get confused between parole and probation and other forms of community release. So I want to make sure that people understood that they're completely diverted from each other, divorced from each other. Probation is totally under the auspices of CSSD, and parole is totally under the auspices of the Department of Correction.
That is
Correct?
correct. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. So I'm going to go to the last 2 representatives that are here, Representative Nuccio, followed by Representative Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for you to come to me right now. I just have a couple of quick questions. I'm sorry if they've been asked, just let me know because I came in a little bit late. And for the reduction of the electronic messaging by inmates, I know we increased the head count in the last budget, I believe, but I think at least it was like 10 or 13 heads.
10, correct.
10, okay. So do you expect any reduction in head count by taking away the electronic messaging?
Those officers will be reallocated to the vacancy positions.
So there, and do you have a lot of
522 correction officer vacancy.
okay, so they'll just be put into there. But so then we will be reducing the head count theoretically because we're keeping them, but we're going to reduce the opens. No. As you just said.
I know, but they're just gonna take a position where we don't.
No, I know.
they're
Yeah.
Not asking to reduce, the administration above him is not asking for a reduction.
Okay, I'll have to figure that out. The overtime reduction plan. I noticed like the overtime, we're asking for an increase this year for deficiencies of about 5.1 million, and then there's an overtime reduction plan. Do you have a clear line of sight into that overtime reduction?
Are you referring to our monitoring of overtime?
She just said you're bringing it to the working group, but no, you have a line item in here specifically, about 2.3 million, a reduction. Reduction plan for overtime.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you have a clear line of sight into what you're gonna do to reduce that overtime.
As the Commissioner mentioned earlier, we have a committee that's set up to formalize that, but generally speaking, it's going to involve balancing our shifts, reducing unnecessary overtime through monitoring, greater scrutiny over the utilization of overtime, and an increase of body count by holding additional cadet classes to refill our vacancies.
Okay,
The
thank you.
number, as the Commissioner mentioned, the number one driver of overtime is position vacancy. And we have a natural attrition rate every year of between 300 to 600 people that attrit from our system either through retirement or other forms of separation. They go to other agencies, they decide they no longer want to work in correction, or they're terminated because of various reasons.
Okay, in the deficiency annualization here, you have 5.1 million. Does that include the overtime that's being used this year in the deficiency?
Are you talking about the deficiency funds that are built into the budget to make up the deficiency?
5.1 million, yes.
Yeah, that would be part of that, but that's more to do with the deficiency, the structural deficit that we have in the underlying budget. We have a structural deficit in both PSOE and inmate medical services that has accrued over the last several years from the closures.
Is that the structural deficit that you say, is that in regard to the 522 vacancies? Is that?
No, the structural, we closed several facilities over the past several years. And at the way it has worked is at the beginning of the fiscal year that those facilities are to be closed, there's an estimate that's provided, and you have reduced the budget by that amount. In those years, the savings that were estimated did not accrue to the level that they were estimated. And that's due to various reasons, inflation, late closures, originally the facilities that were estimated to close were larger facilities than what was ultimately closed. And so we are kind of playing catch up.
Okay, so you could say that you said if I close this facility, we're gonna save $10 million and we only actually saved 5.
Yes, because we didn't close the facility that we thought we were going to close. We'd closed the smaller facility, or we didn't close it when we thought we were going to close it. And in the subsequent years, we've had wage increases, and we've also had inflation, unbelievable inflation in terms of our overhead costs.
Okay, that gets me then to the other expenses, the 16 million there. Can you give a brief breakdown of some of the things that are included in those, the 16 million deficiency and other?
In the
And
other expenditures, electricity, clothing, food, other correctional supplies. We've all gone through this. You go to the grocery store, you know how much more expensive food is. We've also have a higher than anticipated census. The last couple budgets assumed a much smaller inmate population. As the Commissioner has said, we are a few thousand over where we thought we were going to be at this point. And in fact, year over year, at this point last year, we were about 500 to 600 inmates fewer than we are today.
Okay, and then the last question that I have for you, I have one for pardon and paroles, but in the annualization, the cost of existing wage agreements here, there's about $21 million in there for annualization. Does that include your open positions or is that just for belly buttons in the seat?
It would include a little bit of our vacancy as well.
Okay.
The way the budgeting occurs is there's a snapshot that's taken.
Yeah.
There's a snapshot that's taken annually at the beginning of the work for the budget cycle. So it's based on, it's a moving target throughout the year.
So is that though, you have 522 vacancies, that would account for all the vacancies or does it account for a certain percentage of the
It
vacancies?
should accommodate all of those.
Okay, all right, and then I just have one question for pardons and paroles. There's on here, current requirements, almost $1.2 million recurring lapse. Is that, what you expect to be, is that regularly occurring lapse? Like, is this something that we can count on here, or is this just in 1 year lapse?
It's been consistent.
It's been consistent?
Yes.
Okay, and can you just, is that in, it just says the one line item for you? Is that staffing? Is that other? Is that, what is that made up of?
It's basically staffing.
Staffing? Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Representative Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nice to see you, Commissioner. Thank you for being here. with
Good
us
afternoon.
today. And I know that's the hot seat, but hey, you got the job, right? About the same issue about the communications, about the electronic. Is that an application that inmates, they have to fill it out just to use the tablet and make phone calls? Or that, what is the process?
So the process, similar to the phone system, the individual is incarcerated will give us a list of the individuals that they're going to contact with the phone numbers, and those are the individuals that they'll be able to contact. I think every 30 days or I think it's every 30 days, they can change, delete, and add names.
Is by any chance have to be, to do something with the family members sending money to the inmates?
No,
No, that's totally different.
totally separate. Yep.
Okay. Well, I think that you notice here that it's a concern about that, about the communications. It's a big concern here. Do you think that it's possible that maybe you can find out maybe how you can keep that that service to the inmates?
Well, based on today's hearing, I will go back and have a conversation with the secretary and voice the concerns that was shared here. And those are concerns. The concerns that you share today are concerns that I have. Same concerns Senator Winfield had. I have those concerns. So I think it'll be appropriate for me as a commissioner to go back and speak to Secretary Beckham to see how we can possibly save that line item.
But I think that a lot of members in this committee will appreciate that.
Will do.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Walker, again, for the second time or third.
Third and fourth. Can you bring a copy of the contract to the working committee? We'd like to see what we're paying for with the phone messaging.
Yes.
We'd like to get a better understanding of what the charges are, if other people are getting percentages in the payments and things like that. How much, I should ask, how much money does DOC receive in this contract?
The chief operating officer, chief financial officer has the answers.
The contract is a flat fee
Uh-huh.
that we pay. We pay a $30 per inmate per month for
Uh-huh.
phones, whether they make no calls or they make the maximum number of calls. And we pay $15 a month per inmate
Per message.
for messaging, whether they make 0 messages or they make the maximum number of messages.
Okay, so, and then could you bring in the number of people that actually utilize the services so that we can say, well, don't tell us now, please, because I'm not going to remember. And he's going to turn off my mic if I don't shut up. Yes, you would. But I have one other. The other I'd like to know is about community services. I'd like to know over the last 5 years what has been our spend in community services, and are there wait lists for community services right now, and how many people are impacted by the fact that we don't have any services out there for them. How long of an extension goes on their time still behind in DOC before they can get back out in the community? So we'd like to know about that too. Okay?
Provide you that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Representative Gonzalez.
For the second time, thank you. Can you explain me why the items that they have to purchase, they purchase inside the inmates, why a small TV that outside will cost you maybe $100? Why inside is so expensive, like almost $300? And this goes not only with electronic. This is about clothes, sneakers, everything. Why is so expensive inside? Because you have to remember, you have to know that it's not them they are paying for it. It's the family outside.
Correct.
So in a way, they are paying their time, and then the family outside is paying also too, because they want to help their, the members, the loved one, they are locked up.
Yep.
But it's difficult. It's very hard. Things going, it's going up. But inside jail, why the prices is why everything is so expensive?
So there's a markup, and that markup is utilized to pay for the staff that are assigned to the commissary unit. The commissary unit staff are not part of our DOC budget. The markup pays for the staff in the commissary.
But the commissary is something different. This, I'm talking about what I spend. Let's say that well, God forgive me, that inmates pay inside, right? Commissary is totally is separate. Or not?
So the TV is purchased via the commissary.
With the commissary.
Yeah.
Okay. So you
Clothing is purchased via commissary.
with the commissary.
The food items are purchased via the commissary, and within our budget, the way we pay for those commissary workers, staff workers, DOC workers, is with the markup.
That means that the family out here is paying also for the staff in a way, kind of helping for the staff.
Correct.
You think it's fair? But anyway, life is not fair. We don't live in a perfect world, and that's why life is not fair. But again, I think it's unfair, because if they are paying their time, they are inside, and then the family here is also paying for that. So the prices are going up inside like crazy, so here you are, looking for money, and we here just, to see if we can resolve the problem, because we have to. But in a way, other than the state giving you money, the family here in Connecticut, they also, helping with the staff, which is not fair. But in no way, I thought that you have different vendors for different items.
We got O'Keefe as the vendor, and that is a process. We go through the RFP process for the vendor. So we're in contract with O'Keefe probably for the next 2 to 3 years. And then we'll go back out and put out the RFP, see which vendor is going to provide better service. And at that point, if there's an opportunity to reduce the markdown, we take a look at that too.
Well, I hope the next time you can check that contract.
We will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Gilchrist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One more question, Commissioner. Under this budget proposal, what would an entry-level CO make?
Entry-level CO makes about $51,000, and then about another $49,000 for fringe benefit. So it's almost $100,000 when you count the salary and the fringe benefits.
But 51,000 is the base pay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner, for the working group, Unified School District 1, can you let us know how many teachers you have there? How much money you're getting from the state to support Unified School District 1? I think the number is really small, like 0. But and what you're getting relative to the number of students and types of programs that are in Unified School District 1.
Will do. I got the teachers number. We got 110 total. 69 are academic teachers, 27 are career and technical education instructors, 13 pupil service specialists, and 1 librarian. And I'll get you the rest of the information for the work group.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I see no other questions, either online or here. You're free to go, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Up next is going to be Beverly Straight Cavallis, Probate Court Administrator. Beverly, you can start coming up. 1:30?
No worries. It's a long day for you.
I don't know anybody that has short days anymore. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. If you could just give us an overview of what's going on in probate courts these days, and where do we stand relative to funding, and how do you stand relative to your fund balance, and how that sets you up for the next biennium?
So for the record, good afternoon, Senator Austin, Representative Nuccio, and other members of the Appropriations Committee. I am Beverly Straight. I am the Probate Court Administrator for the state of Connecticut, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today and offer information regarding the probate court system. I do have in my written testimony more detailed information, which I'm happy to go over if you have questions regarding that. Our request for this biennium budget for fiscal year 26 is $16 million and $18.2 million for fiscal year 27. Now, what the governor has proposed is the same general fund appropriation that we currently have for the current fiscal budget, fiscal year 25, and that is approximately $13.3 million. He proposes that same level of funding for year 2 of the biennium with a suspension of the sweep as of June 30th of 2025. That proposal, frankly, for year 1 may be sufficient to meet our funding needs if the suspension actually occurs with that flat, consistent funding for this current year, but fiscal year 27 will be problematic. Our request, as I said, is for $18.2 million. And what our goal has traditionally been for our general fund appropriation is to buffer against what I know you've heard me say many times, countless times, is the roller coaster volatility of probate fee revenue. So the normalized level of funding to offer stability and buffering of that is a 25% general fund appropriation for the entire system's budget. We are very unique in the state of Connecticut in that we are the only state public service and judicial system that is largely a self-funded system. But the general fund appropriation is critical. I do thank the governor for proposing funding. We have not always had a proposal for any kind of general fund appropriation, and sometimes the amount has fluctuated as well. I want to note for the committee that the appropriation in large respect covers for the probate court system constitutional and statutorily mandated services predominantly for the indigent parties in our system. Just for fiscal year 26, we are budgeting approximately $13 million for just those expenses. Those are conservators for indigent individuals. Oftentimes, people have family members who are unable or unwilling to step in to handle those responsibilities. Conserved individuals range from elders with dementia to individuals with substance use and psychiatric disorders, and their care needs can be very high. Family are not always equipped to handle those challenges. We also provide $2.2 million in the kinship and respite and grant programs. Melissa's project, which is through Guardian Ad Litem Services, again, case management services for those chronically psychiatric individuals under conservatorships. Very limited number of those constituents can be served, but those dollars are critical. And that aggregate, as I said, for fiscal year 26 is $13 million. The general fund appropriation proposed by the governor just covers that expense. For fiscal year 27, we anticipate, again, the rising costs associated with that, largely because of the increased number of individuals in conservatorships and in psychiatric care in our community. We have an aging population, and that would be $13.4 million. Another aspect, although not evident, frankly, in dollar amounts, but in terms of the volume of increase of need in our system, is translators for individuals with limited English proficiency. We've had an 80% increase in that cost just in the past year, and we anticipate that need will continue to rise. And that's not just necessarily because we have a growing population with limited English proficiency, but the number of matters in our probate courts are continuing to rise as well. I do offer statistics in my testimony. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but overall, year over year, we've had a significant increase just in the volume of petitions in all areas of probate court work. As the committee may also know, actually less than half of the work of the probate court in terms of petitions relate to that traditional probate decedent estate. The vast majority of the cases, and frankly, even more of the time of the courts, is expended to protect the rights of vulnerable individuals in our system. Those are children in need of guardians where their parents have either been incarcerated, have substance use disorders, psychiatric illness, are unable to care for their children, and families step in. Grandparents as guardian has been a national growing trend for many, many years. It continues to be present and necessary here in Connecticut as well. Conservatorships, the goal of conservators is to maintain an individual with capacity issues, regardless of what those capacity issues are, living in the community. Ensuring that community-based services are acquired for those individuals, and to maintain the least restrictive means of intervening to assist them. They're time-intensive cases, but certainly every individual deserves as much independence and self-determination as possible, and that's what the probate courts strive to. 25% of general fund appropriation also allows us to fund for enhancements in technology. We have, just like the judicial branch, a very old case management system, which we are undertaking a redesign to modernize it, increase its efficiencies, as well as to expand the resources of the public and mandated e-filers through our electronic filing system. Cybersecurity is at the forefront of everyone's concern. The probate courts deal with significant confidential matters and confidential information, and ensuring that our systems have as much cybersecurity protection as possible is a component of the expenditures that we feel are critical to expend. We also obviously maintain and support 6 regional children's probate courts. I do still believe they are the jewel of our system. The focus of those regional children's probate courts are to make sure that children remain with their family. Not only their economic benefits from those placements, but the long-term success of children who remain in their communities with their family is far greater than the psychological and other costs of being raised in foster care. The kinship and grant programs, as I shared with you, are paid to guardians who do not receive any kind of DCF subsidy. They are relatives, family members, supporting children, usually in their elder years on limited income, and those fundings are critical. The legislature, when we completed the pilot of the first regional children's probate court 20 years ago, authorized the establishment of 7 regional children's probate courts. We are fortunate to at least have 6. Frankly, I think the children in our communities, our families deserve more regional children's probate courts to expand those critical services with the specialized staff that we have in place there. But we've never had the funding sufficient to add that 7th court or to even expand the geographical service of the courts that we do have. The courts are family-centric. The goal is to develop family-centered solutions, community-based resources for the families that come to the probate courts. And by doing that, we save the state of Connecticut over $2 billion a year by diverting what would be more intensive, more restrictive, and more expensive services that would have to be provided by other state agencies. I have with me here this afternoon Lisa Hanson, who's the Director of Financial Services, and we would both be happy to answer any questions you may have.
So I appreciate everything you do because I know that it's important for us to have resources, and the probate court system has been one of those success stories. We used to have 3 or 4 times the number of probate courts that we have now. You have successfully regionalized those court systems and still been able to provide services for people that are across the board in need of services. We talked a bit about translators, and a lot of people think that that is directly reflective of undocumented folks, and I find that that's not necessarily true. I remember my mom telling me that my mom lived in Taffville, Connecticut, a village of Norwich, and she used to go to church and to school right down the road. And the school was run by the nuns. Now, they were tough teachers, I can tell you that. But they taught in French because many of the people that lived in Taffville, my mom was Irish, but many of the people that lived in Taffville were French, Canadian French, and they'd come down to work at the mill right down the road. So, and they were there legally to work, but they still spoke French, and many of them spoke French their whole life. The community just existed as a French-speaking community. Do you find that many of the people are here, with English language learners that have not really grasped the meaning of every English word that you need these translators for?
I think a critical component of the translators in a court system is not just the language barrier and the depth of knowledge of English or not, but also the complexity of the proceedings. I would guess for many people, and I'm sure you've heard the term legal mumbo jumbo. If you're not a lawyer, you're not trained in the legal system, many of the terms can be confusing. And frankly, frightening and daunting when especially when you're in a matter that involves the probate court, grieving families, whether it's a loss of a child due to illness, and I don't necessarily mean death, but you lose a child when they have a psychiatric illness. When you have an elder who has dementia that is deteriorating their ability to communicate, and family members are trying to navigate a legal system at the same time that they are navigating life's most difficult challenges. So I think that's an element of the translation needs. Clearly, we provide those translators for individuals with limited English proficiency, but there's no per se definition of what that means. And again, in the judicial system, I think it's even more complex than just going to the grocery store and trying to buy your groceries.
I can't agree more. I find that until you have to go through it, you don't know how complicated it is. It's really easy to say, oh, I was talking to some people and talked to you about a case about a mom who had died, and the children were left without anybody but a family member who was out of state. And they knew all the people they knew were here, and they were trying to figure out the complications of what would happen with those children, and could they stay in the area with relatives that were farther removed than a direct parent. And so I think that the work you do is so necessary and so under, it's not appreciated for the level that of the work that you do. And I just want to thank you for doing that work because it is truly those that are the most needy and in the worst times of their lives. You know, to lose a family member, lose a family member. My mom suffered from dementia, and one of my sisters, because I have too many.
I'm one of 8, so feel
I'm
that.
one of 7. I just sometimes say why. They have this text chain that drives me crazy. So I think that they were talking today because my phone kept blowing up. But I am. I don't.
That's so bad.
It is not bad.
Familial connection.
I don't want it.
You hurt my heart as a mom.
Oh.
You hurt my heart.
Just there's a time and a place sometimes.
I agree.
Fun with my girls, and it is like one of my daughters is always like, "Oh my God, I have like 70 texts to reply to. Just answer the damn text."
I'm going to shut her down in a minute. But no, I really appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
It's so important for us, and thank you very much. Representative Nuccio, followed by Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And you know, I appreciate the text chains. I like to know what's going on. She's one of those, you know, she doesn't want to answer. So I was listening to you, and I have to say, I've, you know, being a little educated here because I did not know, and I guess maybe I want to get a little more information on the probate dollars that you have in here, the 13 million. You kept talking about the 13 million. Like, are you asking for double than what the governor has put in? Is that what your request is right now? Because I was trying to track the numbers and I wasn't doing a good job.
Our request is for 16 million for fiscal year 26 and for $18.2 million for fiscal year 27.
Okay.
The governor's proposal is 13.3 million for each of
For
those
each year.
years.
Yeah, it's flat. Okay, and you had mentioned something about respite care. Are you paying for respite care? I guess what is that? I understand the increase in conservatorship because that has to go through probate when you go for conservatorship and all of that. So I understand like you might have an increased caseload because of conservatorships, but what's the respite part of it?
So there are 2 statutory funds established by the legislature. One is called kinship and the other, the formal name in statute, I think, is Grandparents and Relatives Respite Care Fund. They are not, it's a $2 million allocation for each of those funds. We do not per se cover respite care, but a guardian can apply to the court if they are indigent and do not receive a DCF study. It is actually available for probate court appointed guardians and Superior Court appointed guardians. And those funds can be used to support the needs of the child in the community, educational at times. The title is respite care, but it really does not cover, for example, a grandparent taking a vacation and having a break from their grandchild. It covers summer camp, extracurricular activities, after school activities for a child who would benefit from those, but they can't afford it. We have regulations that cover what the application will cover, and we have statutory or regulatory limits on how much each child can receive and each family can receive. It is frankly relatively de minimis if you consider what it costs to raise a child, but it is critical funding for those guardians to assist them to ensure the continued well-being of the children in their care.
So I guess my only question or concern on that is that seems weird to me that we would have probate judges overseeing that would not fall under like DCF or DSS or something like that for where other respite programs are. So I did not know that.
I'd be happy to share with you more information on how that system works. I do think it's quite appropriate to have it under the auspices of the probate court. They are probate court appointed guardians largely. Our family specialists, for example, in the regional children's probate courts are very familiar with each of their families. They are aware sometimes when there is a need for after-school care that they wouldn't otherwise be entitled to any kind of state assistance for. And I do think they're critical dollars. I'd happy to talk to you in more detail on how that system works.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that information, just because again, like I'd never heard that, and it just seems, in my mind, it seems like a weird place to have it. So anything that you have, would be, I would appreciate that. And then you said the 80% increase in translators. Do you currently have funding for translators, or is this already in your budget? Do you have like lapse dollars, or are you guys fully expending?
So the way the probate court system is funded, as I shared at the outset, it's uniquely funded because the vast majority of our funds comes from probate fee revenue. And then we look to and rely on the general fund appropriation to buffer and supplement that to meet all of those system needs.
25%, you said, right? Like we're paying.
Well, that is what we consider to be what would be a normalized level of funding from the state budget. We are not looking, nor do we need the state budget to fund the entirety of the probate court system. But recognizing that the majority of our funding is from volatile resources, the probate fee revenue, we need that to buffer it. Our entire budget system does have an expenditure for translators. In years past, it was not as prevalent a need as it is today, and it continues to grow. In gross dollar amounts, it's not a significant expenditure today, but compared to even 10, 15 years ago, it's growing at an astronomical rate. As I said, 80% just in the past year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for your presentation and all the hard work the probate court system does.
Thank
It's much
you.
appreciated. And I just wanted to, say that I think that the children's court is such a valuable court, and the probate courts are so more oriented toward making sure people have a chance to talk directly with the judge in a more area, instead of going out in a big superior court room and discussing personal family issues. Many times being able to go to a probate judge, go through the children's probate court once the referrals are made. Those are the kinds of things where people have a chance to really have assistance with delving into some of their personal issues. Do you want to just say a couple more words about that?
I think the model of the probate court system in Connecticut is the perfect model to address these types of challenging family issues. It is known historically as the People's Court. Our judges are not sitting on benches. They often are sitting in a hearing room that's somewhat like, sitting at a table. It is an intimate, though formal setting where what can be just private, personal issues can be casually addressed, or in the context of cases like a conservatorship where constitutional rights are at issue, the requisite due process protections are also in place. But again, even in those cases where rules of evidence are strictly adhered to and court-appointed attorneys are an important and integral role in that process, families come together to try to resolve and meet the needs of those respondents. And that's allowed because of the somewhat informal, physical facilities, as well as, frankly, I think the clear compassion and concern that our court staff and our probate judges share.
Thank you for that clarification. And I just want to thank you for all the great work you're doing statewide, and love to see us be able to add that 7th court. Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Gilchrist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you. Thank you so
Good
much.
to see you.
My question has to do with the court-appointed attorneys and the conservators. Are conservators attorneys, or is that a different, what degree does someone need to have to be the conservator?
Well, many conservators are actually family members. And in cases where someone is indigent and has no family member able or willing to step forward, then we appoint conservators who often are attorneys but are not necessarily. There are various skill sets that those conservators have. Some of them are nurses, social workers, accountants, I think their disciplines and their professional training varies.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm looking at this amount that they are paid per hour. And earlier in the day, we heard from the public defender's office that an attorney being paid $88 or $120, I believe it was, is low compared to our surrounding states. And so now looking at $58, is that correct, an hour for the attorney?
Yes.
And then $52 for the, I don't say that word correctly. How do?
It's pronounced both ways.
Okay, conservator. Thank you. Because I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to switch it in my head to say it the way you said it. With your proposal, what would that increase to?
We are not proposing an increase. Just at that same hourly rate, the cost is escalating. I think the estimate is about 5% year over year. Those indigency expenses rise. We have a growing number of conserved individuals and petitions in our courts because of an aging population and complex family issues. So unfortunately, we can't afford to propose a higher hourly rate. I think that the probate courts have an incredible system and a cadre of attorneys and conservators who are willing to serve in these critical roles. But it is, in essence, largely often pro bono work, which is highly valued. But we don't have a dollar amount allocated for that. Our funding request would have to, obviously, on that line item, as I said, our total indigency expenses for conservators and court-appointed attorneys is about $11 million. If we were to double the hourly rate, you're talking $22 million. So it's a significant challenge.
So 2 follow-ups then. If it remains flat funded, will you actually have to reduce that hourly rate? No, you would be.
We rely on the probate fee revenue to ensure the ability to pay those expenses. We would not reduce the rate. We would not limit the number of court-appointed attorneys or conservators. They are constitutionally and statutorily mandated and critical. We would have to, if we had flat funding and insufficient revenue, frankly, we would have to look elsewhere to cut other expenses because those are mandates. And certainly, even if they weren't mandated, are critical to protect an individual's rights.
And then final question, do you find it hard to find these folks willing to do this? with
It
that
is
pay?
increasingly challenging, not just in the state of Connecticut, but nationally, to find attorneys who are willing to take any kind of court appointment. Connecticut's estate and probate bar, I am told, is one of the oldest bars. The average age of an attorney who practices in estate and probates is about 57 years old. A completely side issue is the bar exams across the country are looking to eliminate testing in this area of the law. The concern there is we will have an even further diminishing pool of attorneys who practice probate and estate work. It is a growing concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty, I see no more questions either online or in person. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much. I hope you stay warm.
You too.
I'm gonna go call her sisters and tell them to bug her more.
Well, one lives in California, so good luck reaching her. Yeah. One's in California, one's in Vermont. 2 are in Connecticut.
It's important that you keep touch.
I don't need to keep in touch with them. Oh, so we're all done of our hearing.